Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of What If Deku was protected by the demonic duo Soukoku? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Y'all, we have a cover. Huge thanks to @ArtAndDesign01 on Pinterest for making this for us. I absolutely love it and it is so good. For all the ways today could have gone wrong, this one was possibly the worst. And of course shitty Dazai was in the center of it all. The day had been going well enough until Chuuya and Dazai received a mission from Mori. He hadn't seemed to notice when the duo walked into his office, busy trying to convince Elise-chan to put on a little blue dress. Mori eventually turned to the two, his demeanor becoming calm and serious. Chuuya nervously waited, his iconic hat resting proudly on his head and both hands tucked inside his pockets. He couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation at the implication of Dazai being summoned at the same time as him. A mission requiring the one and only Soukoku. What do you know of the school known as UA High? It wasn't a question, more of a demand as Mori looked at them expectantly for an answer. Neither answered for a moment. Though Chuuya hated to admit it, he knew little to nothing about the world outside Yokohama. What really annoyed him about the question was that even though the bandaged maniac next to him hadn't responded, Chuuya knew the boy was simply waiting to irritate Mori. That's the hero school in Mizudafu, right? From what I know, only pro-heroes teach there, Dazai said. That's right, Mori smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. An old friend of mine works there. He contacted me recently, something about an old favor he had yet to call in. At this, Dazai's visible eye narrowed, but less than a split second later it was replaced by an understanding grin. I see. Chuuya watched the interaction becoming increasingly confused. What the hell are you going on about, shitty mackerel? He screeched. Ma, I didn't know the hat rack was that dumb. Did your brain get all shriveled up from that hat of yours? Says the one who can only see through one eye. And yet I can still beat you. Dazai teased, easily dancing out of the way of every punch Chuuya sent towards his face. You dash. That's enough. Dazai, Chuuya, you will both go to Mizudafu and attend UA High as transfer students, Mori intercepted. According to an old friend of mine, a particular group of students has been receiving a dangerous amount of attention from some high-end criminals known as the League of Villains. What a stupid name, Chuuya muttered. Now Chuuya. Outside Yokohama the world focuses on black and white. It's only expected they base titles and names after these ideologies as well. You will receive the rest of the information upon departure, so go prepare. The train leaves at 8, I recommend that you don't miss it. No FNG way. Just no. How did the Port Mafia expect Dazai and Chuuya to go undercover as hero students for nearly half the year? Dazai sure as hell wouldn't be able to go a week without trying to kill himself, and Chuuya couldn't last a day without his favorite wine. Not to mention they would be babysitting a bunch of high schoolers. Dazai sat across from Chuuya, his chin resting on his intertwined fingers. If he was annoyed by the situation, it didn't show. He leaned forward as if realizing something. Gasp, is the chibi admitting he can't carry out a simple mission? What has the world come to? Hell no. I can babysit some teenagers way better than you ever could. Chuuya growled. Uh-oh, it seems my dog is getting a bit feisty. Maybe I need to feed it again. In a sudden roar of anger, Chuuya swiped his hand across the table as he flung every object he could reach at Dazai using his gravity. Say that again and I'll kill you. TSK, that just won't do. Dazai mused while he dodged. You see, being crushed by gravity sounds like a rather painful way to die, and I really don't enjoy pain. Though if that's what the chibi is into. What? You? Why would I? Chuuya stuttered. His face flushed a deep scarlet as he denied the accusation. Just shut up, shitty mackerel. As suddenly as it started, the two sat silently again, contemplating their assignment and reading the finer details of the contract. Neither party A UA High School nor party B Port Mafia may interfere with private affairs outside the contract. Easy enough, Chuuya thought. though they could stand to be a bit more specific in details like this. Dazai was busy pointing out every loophole he could find in each clause of the contract. Many were ones Chuuya hadn't thought of himself, but he would sooner die than admit that. Neither participating members from Party B Port Mafia Nakahara Chuuya, Osamu Dazai may inflict harm on the students of Class 1A unless given XPLCT permission. Dazai laughed. That's practically begging us to hurt the students from other classes and the staff. And what about mental damages? I have an idea, he trailed off. During the time PRD in which Nakahara Chuuya and Osamu Dazai attend UA High School, they are required to keep their role as one as bodyguards secret from any person not on the designated list. How strange. Only 1A and a few staff members would be in on the situation. Would they know they were from Yokohama? How much of the situation would they be aware of? Fortunately, this didn't complicate things, but it did mean they would have to be much more careful. After reading through the rest of the contract, Chuuya snatched the students' files from Dazai and began filing away the information he deemed important, as well as which students got into trouble or targeted the most. He didn't care to check any other information as Dazai would surely have it memorized. Oi Chibi. Look at this. Chuuya stood up and walked to the other side of the table to peer at the file Dazai was holding. It was not because Chuuya was too short to lean far enough over the table, and it was definitely not because his hat would have gotten in the way had he leaned too far. Of course not. Although the glint behind Dazai's eyes seemed to indicate he knew what Chuuya was thinking, he didn't point it out. Dazai held up the file. Think you can get a couple copies of this? Who do you think I am, you piece of shit? Of course. The first thing Chuuya and Dazai noticed were the people. It was more than different skin tones and height. Some people had tails and horns, some were more animal than human. Even abilities didn't affect its user this badly. Chuuya looked around in awe as he took in the buildings and daily life of Mizudafu. Dazai merely looked intrigued. Chuuya, Dazai said, snapping Chuuya out of his daze. I'm bored. Go find something to do then, I don't know. Chuuya replied, what about our living arrangements? Chuuya groaned inwardly at the giant grin that stretched across his partner's face. Dazai didn't ease his mind with a response, instead heading for the nearest unsuspecting stranger. She was an extremely flashy woman and wore a white, skin-tight bodysuit with a black garment on top. It had a singular strap from the center of her chest that joined the rest of the garment around her waist. A red belt and mask seemed to finish the look. Dazai bent down on one knee in front of her. He had better not be doing what Chuuya thought he was going to do. You are as appealing and ethereal as the moon, would you care to join me in a double suicide? He asked innocently. The lady looked surprised for a moment before responding with a good-natured laugh. You flatter me. I'd much rather live, but I can help you with whatever you're struggling with, darling. Are things all right at home? She added as she took in all the bandages, her eyes catching a moment longer on the ones wrapped around his wrists. Oh, you wound me. Will I never find a appealing woman to commit suicide with? Perhaps you can at least tell me the way to UA. You see, me and my partner Chibi over there have some important business with the principal and we really can't be late. Hey mackerel dash, Chuuya interrupted. I'm sorry about him, but we have to get to you. Which way would we go? Sometime later, as the two arrived at the UA gates, a short, mouse-like figure stood patiently just outside the entrance. The taller of the two he decided must be Dazai Osamu, meaning the redhead was Nakahara Chuuya. They were younger than he was expecting. It was rather hard to believe the most feared and respected duo in Yokohama were teenagers. They surprised him yet again when they immediately detected his presence. He was never trained in hiding his presence and never claimed it to be his strong suit, but most people didn't even realize they were in the same room until he spoke. How interesting, he thought. Hello. You must be Nizu-san. Mori-sensei spoke highly of you, Dazai exclaimed. He bowed deeply and grinned, motioning for Nakahara to do the same. Yes, thank you, you must be Dazai and Nakahara. I'm sure you know why you're here. Nizu asked, although he already knew the answer. His intelligence was unrivaled among those at UA, but he could tell these two were the real deal. No matter how confident he was in the staff and his abilities to beat Soukoku, some tiny part of him, perhaps what remained of his animal instincts, screamed at him to never drop his guard around them. Of course. I hear there's an unfortunate issue with pests, Dazai said. Nakahara huffed and shoved his hands in his pockets. Now is not the time for games, sure, Dazai. Nizu got the distinct impression the boy was going to curse, curious as to why he stopped himself. If Nizu was right, he was pretty sure he was Nakahara cursed pretty often, so why did he look annoyed at himself when he almost said one? Perhaps Mori told them they couldn't since students would be around. But then why would they even know those kinds of words if they are the same age as the students? Dazai chuckled bashfully, his hand on the back of his neck. Right, Nizu? Will we be meeting the students today or tomorrow? And how much of the situation will they know? Nakahara turned and made a gagging motion. At this, Nizu simply raised what would be considered an eyebrow and turned back to Dazai. Ignore him, he said. I'm glad the both of you are eager to get started. Since you will be living in one of the dorms here, we figured you would use today to get to know the campus better and settle into your dorm. The rest of the student dash. Wait. Dorm? As in a singular dorm? Nakahara interrupted. In an instant the aura around Dazai went from playful to dangerous as he sent a withering glare to Nakahara, who immediately shut up. It made Nizu feel cold and those prey instincts came back in full swing. He shuffled back a few steps before the aura became calm again. It's not nice to interrupt our little friend here, Chibi-chan, don't you remember? Mori said we would be sharing a room. Right? Of course I remember. Nakahara growled. Nizu frowned. Is there something wrong with this arrangement? Mori-san specifically asked for you two to share a room, but if you have an issue with that, there are a couple spares. Both boys assured him they would be fine, and Nizu showed them to the dorm. It was not very far from campus and was near the center of the dorm complex. That way they would have easy access to everyone in case of an emergency. Though the rest of the dorms were empty at the moment, the duo knew they only had a few hours at best before school was over for the day. Hopefully they could hide out in the dorm room until they were introduced to the class in the morning, but knowing Dazai, Chuuya figured he had something else in mind. Before Chuuya could say anything after Nizu left, Dazai held a finger up to his mouth with a stern expression. Confused, Chuuya obliged. For the next 15 minutes or so, Dazai searched the room for anything that could be used to spy or listen in on them. Not a single camera or listening device was found, and that likely meant two things. The heroes were fools and already trusted them, and the heroes were gravely underestimating them. Luckily, Nizu had already taken the liberty of putting a second bed in there even if it limited the space. Both beds were spaced out in a way to leave the center and edges open, and the headboards were against the wall. On the rightmost side of the room was the bathroom. It simply contained a toilet and a basic shower/bathtub, as well as a small sink and mirror. On the leftmost wall was a large closet that could have been big enough to hold Chuuya's whole wine stash and Dazai's bandage collection. I get the right bed, Dazai declared. I already put my stuff on that side. Chuuya yelped. As my loyal dog and subordinate, you must do whatever I tell you to do. And I order you to move your stuff away from my half of the room. Don't call me a dog, he grumbled, using gravity to move his stuff and rearrange some things each time Dazai ordered him to. While Dazai found the situation amusing, he wasn't one to enjoy undercover missions. It's been a few days since, he thought to himself. Surely Mori wouldn't punish me if no. Dazai knew he shouldn't think like that. Mori would punish him no matter what the situation was. Usually he didn't care what Dazai did regarding his life, but if it interferes with his ability to do a job, it certainly wouldn't end well. I can wait. Just at least until we meet the students, that way I can say I was there. Until then, Dazai resolved to hide his knives and blades under the bathroom sink, as well as an extra roll of bandages. He wouldn't have to worry about Chuuya snooping around since he wouldn't care what dangerous items Dazai had with him. Dazai certainly wasn't the only one who brought weapons, but Chuuya's bullets wouldn't be of any use to Dazai without a gun. Chuuya looked at his watch, DMN. The students would be here any minute now. He got up to lock the door and shoved a bag in front of it to block any light from the room from going into the hallway. Sure enough, the sound of footsteps and chatter soon filled the room. If only Chuuya could go out there and tell them to shut up. Patience, Chibi-kun, you'll get to meet them soon enough. Aizawa dragged himself to class. Normally he got at least 3 or 4 hours of sleep in after night patrol, normally. And yesterday was not normal. As he made his way down the halls, he realized he hadn't even woken up. He didn't get a wink of sleep as he stayed up going over the files of the 2 transfer students that made it to his class. Nizu said that he recruited them personally, but they couldn't be more than 16 years old. Aizawa had been expecting someone a little more seasoned. How would 2 kids even be qualified to protect people the same age as them? What was the point in bringing in 2 teenagers over another pro hero? What would they be able to do if it came down to killing? Trust me, Eraserhead. They are more than capable of protecting your students, Nizu had said the night before. And now it was the day to introduce them to his class and give the sugar-coated version of what's going on. Opening the door to the 1A, Aizawa counted the seconds for them to quiet down. 6.75 seconds, not the worst. Good morning, problem children. Today there's been a bit of a change in plans, he grumbled. Confused looks were exchanged between students as they waited for him to continue, hoping it was nothing bad. As you know all too well, your class has been the target of many villain attacks. Kaminari raised his hand and spoke before Aizawa had the chance to tell him to put his hand down. Are there more villains? There wasn't another attack, right? No, Kaminari, please just let me finish, Aizawa glared. Because of these incidents, the school decided you need more personal protection. No, Kaminari, you are not being locked in your dorms. 2 new students will be joining your class as of today. These students are trained with a different skill set than you all are, and they will temporarily be your personal bodyguards. The hell? I don't need a kid to protect me. I'll beat 'em up if they ever come near me. Bakugu shouted, his palms glowing lightly. What? If they are students as well, how will they protect us? Won't it make it more difficult on the teachers? Asked Ida. The students erupted in chatter as they anticipated the arrival of the new students. They would supposedly be arriving in a couple minutes, but 5 passed. And then 10. Everyone sat dead silent when the doorknob rattled. Someone got up to open the door, but it was slammed open from the other side. Here, the first voice declared as they marched into the classroom. Look, Chibi, they all look so shocked. Shut the hell up, shitty mackerel, we're obviously late, the second said. This voice belonged to a short, orange-haired male who was obviously not in a good mood as he dragged the brown-haired male into the classroom. They both wore the UA uniform. Ah, the Chibi is so mean. Remember what I said about cursing in front of the clients? He teased, pulling his arm away from Chibi and dusting off his. Were those bandages? Do I look like I effing care? FING, focus already. For a moment, Aizawa didn't say anything, opting to ignore the bickering duo. You're late. Class, please welcome Nakahara and Dazai, your new classmates and bodyguards. As if a SWCH had been flipped, Class 1A began asking questions while Nakahara and Dazai simply waited patiently for the questions to quiet down. What? You guys are bodyguards? How old are you? Which one's Dazai and which one is Nakahara? How do you have a job already? Everyone, Ida interjected, I know we are all excited about new classmates, but please give them a moment to breathe. Thank you, Tenya Ida, the brunette said with a grin, but it's nothing we can't handle, right, Hatrak? Even Jin is harder to deal with than them, the orange-haired boy agreed. The name's Chuuya Nakahara, just call me Chuuya. I don't particularly enjoy hearing my family name. He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder to point to the other boy. Don't listen to anything that idiot over there says about me. You know what? Just don't listen to him at all. Ma Chibi-kun, what a horrible introduction. I'm Dazai. My quirk is touch-activated nullification. The Hatrak can control gravity. We're not allowed to tell you much more than that since our job is to protect you. I apologize that I am doubting your abilities, but how will you two be able to do what we cannot? We have been heroes in training for almost a year. Ida stood, chopping his arms in the air as if to prove his point. I was actually wondering the same thing, Momo added. Dazai and Chuuya looked at each other with an expression even Aizawa could not decipher. Dazai had a strange glint in his eyes while Chuuya looked as though he was holding back a laugh. He seemed more confident than he was earlier, if that was even possible. His shoulders were relaxed as his hands rested in his pockets, and even though he looked open and unprepared, Aizawa couldn't find a single opening in his stance. The difference between you and us, Chuuya began, is that you are still heroes in training. Where we come from, as long as you're useful, you can begin training at any age, meaning you can get a job pretty young. Me and Dazai, we've been doing this kind of sheet for years. The students gaped at him in shock. Aizawa was stunned. These kids. Just what exactly did they mean by useful? And what did he mean by doing this for years, bodyguarding? Or was it something else? Midoriya perked up, notebook in hand. Whoa, so you guys are already heroes? How old were you when you debuted? How come we've never heard of you? There he goes. I was wondering how long it would take for Problem Child to ask questions. Ooh, you're a smart one, aren't you? Dazai chuckled. Yes, we are heroes. But in our city, most people prefer not to leave the borders. It's pretty peaceful there, you see. Me and Chibaiko are a part of a well-respected group and keep the crime rate down. We haven't had very many clients out here, so that's why you haven't heard of us. Bakugo rolled his eyes. If you're so strong, why don't you ever leave that peaceful city, I bet you only ever dealt with weak criminals. You must be Bakugo Katsuki. Your file wasn't very interesting if I'm being honest. Explosion quirk, first place in the sports festival but had to be restrained, targeted by the sludge villain, anger issues. You don't seem very strong to me. Who are you to insult us? The brunette wore a sickeningly sweet smile that gave Aizawa the chills as the boy stalked over to Bakugo. You aren't even strong enough to directly challenge us, and you know it, don't you? That's why you tried riling us up. Dazai, Aizawa stepped in. I think that's enough. Why don't you and Chuuya find a spot to sit so that I can start class? It was almost strange how quickly they complied. Bickering, they sat on the wall furthest from the door, right in front of a window. There was something unsettling about the way they walked, but Aizawa couldn't place it. All right, class, pay attention. Today we're going to do some practical exercises. You all can go get on your hero outfits and meet me at ground beta. You have 7 minutes. Dazai, Chuuya, stay with me. The students left quickly in a jumbled mess, much to Ida's annoyance, and the moment the door shut, Aizawa let out an exhausted sigh. As the duo approached him, he leaned back against a wall. Dazai considered the man curiously before grinning. Can we help you with something? No, it's nothing like that. Do you have outfits you can change into for training? Aizawa asked. Straight to the point, I see, Dazai mused. I dunno, Chibi, what do you think? Chuuya's eyes narrowed before responding carefully. I think the usual should be fine. Might need a few adjustments. I think so too. Well, Eraserhead, is that all? Just me outside when you're done. I'm sure you know by now that heroes don't get the luxury of time. When Chuuya got to the fake city, he was bombarded with bright colors and ridiculous costumes of spandex and silly accessories that seemed to hold little combat purpose. This was the future generation of heroes? What a joke. In Yokohama, sure, the outfits were a little extravagant. But this? Hell, not even the ADA would know what to do with them. All 20 students chatted excitedly as they waited for instructions, but did a double take when they saw Dazai and Chuuya, who stood side by side in their port mafia clothes. Aizawa looked them over for a solid minute before giving a small nod of approval. Chuuya sported his typical black hat and gloves, but Dazai convinced him to leave off the choker as it might be a little too much. A barely visible dress shirt was topped with a gray vest/waistcoat, and to finish the look, a long black coat. Dazai dressed similarly, a white button-up shirt with a black tie and straight black briefs. Mori's black coat rested loosely on his shoulders. Bandages were visibly wrapped around his wrists, but Chuuya knew there were much more. Dazai opted out of wearing the bandages around his eyes since it would raise too much suspicion. After all, they were supposed to be heroes, not mafiosos, and Dazai's bandages were pretty recognizable. Oh, you guys look so cool. Are those your hero costumes? A pink-skinned girl who Chuuya recognized as Mina was suddenly in front of them, jumping up and down like she was on a sugar high or something. Dude, you two look totally manly. This boy had spiky red hair and pointy teeth. Something. Kiriyama? Kirishima? Chuuya thought proudly. Tease, they're just a couple extras, Bakugo muttered. This kind of outfit is pretty common in our city, so it's nothing much. Dazai waved his hand nonchalantly. His eyes suddenly locked on a building not too far into the city. Wow, that's a very tall building. How many floors do you think it is? Maybe like 15? I don't know. Hey, what do you think of UA so far? Hagakure looked right at Chuuya, who internally groaned at being dragged into the conversation. It's pretty big. I haven't really been here long enough to have much of an opinion, Chuuya lied. He had a very strong opinion about UA, but it wasn't one he could voice. At least not to the students. Aizawa saved Chuuya from the students by announcing that the exercise would start soon and that some hero named All Might would be joining them, earning squeals of excitement from many. Guess he's a hotshot around here. Shitty Dazai will have a lot of fun with him if that's the case. I pity the poor hero, Chuuya thought with a sheet-eating grin that completely contrasted his thoughts. Dazai tapped Chuuya's shoulder from behind and put his finger to his lips. Quirking his eyebrow, Chuuya waited for him to say something. Dazai leaned in until his lips were at Chuuya's ear. You can act, can't you? This, All Might, is the #1 hero in Japan, so they are going to be confused if we aren't excited. Remember what we went over in the dorm like a good little dog. Hugh, was all Chuuya whispered back. I am here. Ready to teach like a normal person, a loud, booming voice echoed through the fake city. He was a tank of a man, with a muscular body and sunken eyes. The front of his blonde hair stood straight up. Oh, no way, are you really All Might? Dazai exclaimed, his eyes lit up and he leaned in with interest. Indeed I am, young boy. Might you tell me who you are? I'm afraid I don't recognize you or your buddy, but you must want to become heroes since you're tagging along with my students. All Might's grin never left his face. In fact, it seemed to get bigger every minute he stood there. Chuuya did his best to look like a starstruck fanboy. His mouth opened a little and he widened his eyes. Dazai must have predicted this because Chuuya could feel just how ridiculous he must have looked, but 1A ate the act up. I'm Dazai. That's Chibaiko. We're the transfer students, Dazai responded with a careful mix of eagerness and confidence. Well then, young Dazai and young Chibaiko dash. You bandaged BC. That's not my name. But Chibaiko. All Might looked unsure of what to do and turned to Aizawa for help. Chuuya, that's not a very respectful thing to call your partner. He was probably just teasing, so it's nothing to get worked up about. That's right, Chibaiko. Don't get worked up over a cute, friendly nickname, right? I'm not getting worked up. Eraserhead, please just don't worry about whatever nicknames we call each other. They don't cause any harm and it's really none of your business. Chuuya tried to salvage the situation, but that manipulative BSTRD truly knew no limits. I don't care what you call each other in your free time, but as you were employed by this school, we request you keep your language school appropriate for the time you are here. Chuuya wanted to tell him that if it wasn't in the contract, he had no place telling either of them what to do, but since he was supposed to keep a good image, he simply muttered, "Yes, Aizawa-san," and glared into the back of Dazai's head. So, All Might chuckled nervously, "From the way you're speaking, I take it you are the temporary bodyguards?" Yep. Don't worry about us if there's ever an attack, we won't get in your way so you don't need to stress that, Chuuya said. Since we were contracted to help, our boss gave us a license to use our abil quirks in public. Plus, we'll make sure to do our best to help the #1 hero. We're much stronger than you think, Dazai offered confidently. Well then I think it's time you put your abilities to the test. Listen up, class. Today you will be doing 2 versus 1 against me, All Might, Dazai, and Chuuya. Aizawa began, and everyone turned to look at him. You will be playing as the heroes and one of us will act as the villain. We will draw lots to decide teams and to level out the playing field for our new students. Dazai and Chuuya have been given the liberty of assigning hero teams to the villain. A surprised Chuuya glanced over to Dazai, who only looked amused. Did he expect this to happen as well? Maybe not this exact situation, but probably something along the lines of that. Demon mackerel. If only Chuuya didn't rely on the plans Dazai made. Unfortunately, they always seem to work out in the end. The students were an even mix of excitement and uncertainty at the idea of fighting their new classmates. Sure, they looked strong, but could they really beat some of UA's best students? They were the same age and from an unknown city. All Might held out a hat with slips of paper to the awaiting class. It's time to draw the lots. Of the 10 matches, Dazai had placed Chuuya in 3. From what he understood, Dazai was setting the matches up in a way that no matter the outcome, they would gain the students' respect and trust. This was definitely essential in the long run if they wanted to get information. Annoyingly enough, Chuuya was also going to have to hold back a lot. Strong enough to be seen as a valuable asset, but not too strong that it caused suspicion. Remember what we went over in the dorm like a good little dog. When the pair had been getting dressed not too long ago, Dazai went over the strengths and weaknesses of a few potential threats. I'm only going over this once, so you better put your little brain to good use. One of them was Todoroki Shoto, the son of the current number 2 hero. Apparently he seemed to have some childhood trauma from him. Because of this he refuses to use his left side, which was a fire quirk, although there is the occasional situation where he needs it for fighting villains. In the class rankings, he consistently ranked at the top, always dominating with his ice. A very strong power, but in comparison to for the Tainted Sorrow it was incredibly weak. Chuuya watched carefully as Dazai wrote down the final group, Todoroki and Jiraiya versus Dazai. "Oh Aizawa-san," Dazai called. "We finished the matchups." Aizawa glanced over at them before gruffly acknowledging the pair. "Good, now we can get back on track." The pairings. Team A Todoroki Shoto and Jiraiya versus Dazai. Team B Uraraka Achiko and Kota Koji versus Chuuya. Team C Sato Rikido and Bakugo Katsuki versus Dazai. Team D Tenya and Izuka Midoriya vs All Might. Team E Shiro Hanta and Kaminari Denki vs Aizawa. Team F Ishido Mina and Tsu Azui vs All Might. Team G Hagakure Toru and Yaoyorozu Momo vs Chuuya. Team H Tokoyami Fumikage and Ojiro Mashireo vs All Might. Team I Kirishima Idru and Shoji Mizo vs Aizawa. Team J Mineta Minoru and Aoyama Yuga vs Chuuya. The first match will be between Team A and Dazai. You guys can go get ready for your match. For the heroes, your goal is to place this tracking device on the villain, or discovering their base. Their base is essentially the villain's main area of operations. It could be anywhere from the top floor of an apartment, or some basement in a house. Aizawa spoke loud and clear as he explained how the assignment worked. If you declare the wrong place as the villain's base twice, you lose. On the villain's side, our goal is to not get tagged by the tracker and protect our base until the timer runs out. Many villains are masters at psychological manipulation, and you will face that today. God damn it, Dazai, just don't mess them up too bad. Boss will be said if something happens, Chuuya warned, leaning back against the wall furthest from the monitors. Some students looked curiously at both of them. What did Chuuya mean? Who was this boss he talked about? Ma Hatrak, don't you trust me? That just makes me want to mess them up even more. Dazai's expression reminded Chuuya of how he acted around his subordinates. Those cold, narrow eyes and plotting smile were 100 times better than this cheery, hero wannabe persona Dazai had adopted for the mission. You know what I mean, don't do any more than necessary. Dazai scoffed slightly at Chuuya's demanding tone before walking out of the monitoring room and into Ground Beta City. He had to find the perfect base, and he knew exactly where he wanted it to be. Dazai ducked into another alleyway as he followed the hero team. Todoroki and Jiraiya walked aimlessly around the city in hopes of either encountering Dazai's or his base, but so far had no luck. They avoided every construction sign that had arrows, fully expecting a trap if they followed them. They all pointed in the same direction. Jiraiya paused for the millionth time to check if he was nearby. Unfortunately for them, Dazai was immune to quirks. While Jiraiya sent out sound waves to search for anyone nearby, Dazai nullified everything sent his way. If she had been just a little more observant, she would have noticed a peculiar spot of sound where all noise was SE'd away like a black hole. "Nope, not here either," Jiraiya said loudly. "When we find him, don't get in my way," Todoroki ordered. "I don't need to worry about my teammate getting caught in the crossfire when I freeze him." Ah, truly a man of many words, Dazai thought sarcastically. Not only were they stupid enough to discuss a plan in enemy territory, they didn't even have a proper plan. Todoroki was too arrogant for his own good. Jiraiya was too unconfident to properly make use of her quirk. Right, but what if he evades us until the timer runs out? Jiraiya asked. They were no longer walking. That won't happen, we'll either find him or his base. He can't run forever. I still don't sense him, let's check one of the buildings nearby. Dazai decided this was a good time to reveal himself, stepping grandly out from the alley. I'm afraid I'm going to need to stop you both right here. It's him. How dash? Jiraiya began. Has anyone ever told you how appealing you are? Dazai asked shamelessly, earning a bright blush from Jiraiya, who turned her face in embarrassment. Todoroki narrowed his eyes before raising his right arm. If you surrender now, we won't have to harm you. Give up your base before I freeze you and the surrounding area. Dazai's eyes widened as he leaned in childishly. You would do that for me? While the heroes are going to freeze me to death. You aren't going to die. The police will thaw you before it gets to that point. So the heroes can't even clean up their own messes now? The new generation must be truly hopeless if all they can do is hand out threats. Dazai turned serious as he stalked closer to Todoroki. His eyes slightly crazed. Freeze me, Todoroki. You can do it, can't you? You can freeze a helpless villain like me. Right. In an instant, Todoroki's ice enveloped Dazai, but immediately shattered into blue light. Jiraiya backed up in surprise. She almost sent out a sound wave to knock the villain over, but thought better of it when she remembered the plan. Todoroki glared and sent more and more ice, each one facing the same fate. Dazai can't keep using his quirk forever, Jiraiya, we just have to wear him down. I thought he said his quirk was nullification like Aizawa-sensei. I don't know what he's doing, maybe he lied to get an advantage during training. Dazai chucked inwardly. He masterfully dodged each wave of ice sent his way, reaching out a hand every now and then to clear the path. And now it was time for the sudden realization in 3, 2, wait, Todoroki! He didn't stop his onslaught of attacks but nodded his head in acknowledgement. The timing, he only came out of hiding when I said we should check the nearby buildings. That means his base has to be close by, right? That's... Jiraiya, go check the buildings, I'll try to get the tracker on him. Use the comm if you think you're ready to make our first guess. Dazai disappeared behind Todoroki, sending several nervous glances at an abandoned warehouse in the opposite direction of where Jiraiya was heading. Todoroki lunged at Dazai with another wave of ice. His hand went to the intercom on his ear as he ordered Jiraiya to check the warehouse. Dazai put on a show of gritting his teeth when Jiraiya suddenly changed direction. In just a few seconds, he had made it to Jiraiya, Todoroki not far behind. Ugh, he might just forfeit his other matches. It took too much energy to put on a convincing show for the baby heroes. Hey, you have a little something, Dazai purred in Jiraiya's ear, discreetly pulling out a knife from his coat. Right here. The next thing the heroes knew, Jiraiya had a knife to her throat. She cursed at herself for getting flustered at the attractive man and attempted to pull away from his arms. The back of the knife pressed firmly against her neck. Dazai showed no sign of remorse, however, and tilted his head back to face Todoroki. That's not a fair move, Dazai. Only cowards take hostages and I don't. Believe Nizu or Aizawa-sensei would approve of you using a knife, Todoroki hissed. And only idiots wouldn't make use of their knowledge, I'd say we're even. They were in no way even. Dazai could have beat them in a couple minutes if he really tried. But they didn't need to know that, not yet at least. I'm not sure what you are trying to imply. Me and Jiraiya have been using our knowledge from the start. Well, I've dropped many hints as to where my base is. You were all just too dumb to realize it. Now, little hero. If you want your friend to be released safe and sound, I suggest you follow my every word, Dazai said, pulling Jiraiya closer. Conflicted, Todoroki glanced between the warehouse and Jiraiya. He put his hand up to his ear to use the intercom and found only air. He stepped back in shock as Dazai twirled the intercom on his finger. I swiped it off you earlier. Ready to listen yet? What's he doing? One of the students asked. Many shocked whispers were exchanged between the students as they watched the match. He can't do that. That is not manly. Calm down everyone, Aizawa interrupted. Let's just see how this goes. I agree that the method he is using is a bit underhanded, but Jairu is not in any danger right now. Chuuya boredly watched the match. In Yokohama, at least the people put up a bit of a fight. Quirks really were worthless. At least Dazai had confirmed no longer human does work on quirks as well. It would be unfortunate if it didn't. Well, I've dropped many hints as to where my base is. You were all just too dumb to realize it. What? When did he give them any hints? Denki looked baffled. Well, All Might responded, he is most likely lying to catch young Todoroki off guard and make him doubt himself. It is a very smart method of doing so, but you should always make sure you can back up your words. Chuuya couldn't hold back his laugh anymore. The situation was so ridiculous. He didn't think he would ever see the day somebody openly doubted Dazai Osamu, the demon prodigy and one half of Soukoku. Is something funny to you, young Chuuya? I can't dash. Oh my god. You actually think he would lie about that? Chuuya practically doubled over with laughter before steadying himself on a table by the monitors. Would you mind explaining to us what you mean by that? Aizawa glared. That DMN manipulative BSTRD has been dropping hints since before the test started. Let's see. What do you guys think is his base? Based on what you've seen so far, where is his base? Yayorozu raised her hand. It has to be the warehouse, right? He only showed up when they got close, and he looked nervous about how close the fight was to it. Then when Jairu started going to the warehouse, he took her hostage and even took Todoroki-san's earpiece so that he couldn't make any guesses. Wrong. The class looked shocked. His base is the tall apartment complex by the entrance. What makes you think that? I have no doubt that you know Dazai better than anyone else here, but how can you be so sure that's his base? Aizawa said carefully. He looked slightly impressed. Chuuya did not look impressed in the least. Before the test was explained, he asked some students about the complex, how tall they thought it was. Of course, with shitty Dazai being the a-hole prodigy he is, he already knew what the test would be and wanted to flaunt some hints before defeating the hero team. Although I don't doubt the second reason he asked about it. Ignore that last part. He surveyed the room, taking in all the shocked and impressed expressions before he continued. When he kept looking at the warehouse, it was to distract the heterochromatic dude and Jai, is that her name, from going straight to his base, which was in the direction she had been heading. The arrows were also genuine. If they followed them, it would have taken them to the apartment complex, a little psychology trick the damned mackerel picked up a few years ago. Dang, you're actually smart, Siro deadpanned. Haich? You wanna say that again? Why do you think I wasn't? Whoa, dude, chill. It was a compliment. Hey guys. The hero team just lost. Mina exclaimed. And the villain team wins, All Might declared. Since the hero team guessed wrong both times, the win goes to Dazai. Please reveal to the heroes your real base. Dazai looked directly into the nearest camera and bowed extravagantly, one arm sweeping out, gladly. So are you two ready to see my ever-villainous base? Please just get this over with, Dazai-sen. Chuuya realized that Todoroki kid finally started using honorifics for Dazai. He must have really done a number in him while I was busy explaining his mess. He had better not act like he does with Akutagawa. There would be a lot of explaining to do, and quite frankly, Chuuya pitied the poor kid. Let's go. Dazai led the two heroes down multiple blocks, several twists and turn later, realization seemed to have kicked in for Todoroki. He paused. Oh, the word couldn't have been any more soft as his eyes bore defeat. Finally understand, did ya? Now do you see how much more improved me and the chibi are than you students? We've worked together unfortunately for years. My dog probably figured out my plan the second it was put in motion. Chuuya let his ego flare for a moment too long and dropped his guard enough for Dazai to land the final blow. But then again, a dog can only learn so much. I'll have to give him a treat when I get back. Dazai-san, I still don't get it. Where Jair began before following Todoroki's line of sight. The construction arrows. Oh. Then they arrived at the building. Behold! The lovely building of 13 stories, the one place every single arrow pointed to. But we thought it was a trap. Jairu tried to defend themselves. You shouldn't have. Dazai replied simply. And that was it for the first match. All Might looked rather conflicted. Dazai had been too good for him to chalk it up as coincidence, but it was hardly possible for a boy his age to have that much battle experience, and he had even implied Chuuya was on the same level, if not better than Dazai. Where did they say they were from again? The next match was Uraraka Achiko and Kota Koji versus Chuuya. He didn't know much about either of them. If Dazai didn't warn him, they were either weak or Dazai was being in butt. Maybe a little bit of both. His base was pretty hidden, he didn't make it obvious like his partner did, but it was easy to find if the students tried hard enough. He chose a nice little home on a side street and put the marker inside that showed he claimed it as his base. House number 258, Chuuya chuckled at the irony. Unlike the first group, Uraraka and Kota didn't go parading around to find Chuuya. They stayed pretty hidden and did a good job staying out of his line of sight. He had let them find him, but it was up to them how they used the advantage Chuuya had given them. Out of nowhere, a bird swooped at Chuuya and he dodged easily, albeit annoyed. The F-dash? He muttered as more and more birds attacked him. He couldn't kill the birds just because he was annoyed, that wasn't very hero-like after all. Now! Uraraka called. It was an idiot move, letting your enemy know your location and revealing what was happening. No matter how solid your plan is, if your enemy catches on it becomes useless. A very large bird, maybe a hawk, dived from behind. In its claws was the tracker. Chuuya swatted the bird out of the air on instinct and it went flying, pun intended, with a terrified shriek. Ah shit, too much power. By now, Chuuya was pretty sure the birds were one of their quirks. Probably the one with the mutation. He could feel one of them fuming behind a building and rolled his eyes. The girl, Uraraka, rushed out from the building she was using as cover and dived for the bird, rolling as she held it tight to her chest. She placed it in a sheltered spot before glaring directly at Chuuya. It was a truly pathetic glare. Why would you do that? It did nothing wrong, she accused. The moment you included it in your plans, it was no longer uninvolved. So do I have to listen to your good old hero monologue, or are we gonna get down to business? She was obviously hesitant from the last match, but still determined to win. She took a fighting stance from her spot about 20 meters from Chuuya. Not bad. She wasn't completely useless it seemed, but she lacked experience. Another person came out from behind, the one that controlled the birds. Chuuya didn't expect him to participate in the fight. He was too timid. As such, he was promptly forgotten by the vertically challenged team. Uraraka faltered as she decided whether or not to make the first move. Chuuya stood unmoving. His feet were planted into the ground. His hands rested loosely in his breath pockets. And then he moved. If he was going to be indefinitely confined in the school, he might as well make the most of it. His body glowed red as the ground cracked underneath him. Step after step, the ground crumbled under his feet. At 160 centimeters, Chuuya was hardly intimidating, and yet, she froze in place like a deer in headlights. Uraraka couldn't move as he strode up the street. She barely summoned enough strength to float herself before he reached her. Chuuya grinned madly as she floated in the air. I remember now, you can nullify gravity. Not much you can do with that at your level though. He quickly followed her, launching himself into the air. Uraraka looked about ready to vomit as Chuuya raised a leg to kick. She slammed into the ground, coughing up blood. His intercom buzzed to life. Oh Chu, this is a training exercise, remember? He didn't even have time to wonder how Dazai had gotten his hands on a comm while he was in the monitor room, but it seemed the teachers still didn't know he had one. He realized his mistake too late and another voice buzzed in his ear. Nakahara Chuuya. Please refrain from going so hard on the students, this is training. If you do not manage your strength you will be forced to forfeit the match. All Might failed to hide the shock in his voice as he gave the warning. Yes sir, Chuuya grumbled. He hadn't even been going that hard. How did they expect these kids to become pro-heroes with such weak training? Uraraka stumbled upright as she attempted to prepare herself. Kota looked worried and ran to her side for support. They were both taken aback at Chuuya's nonchalant attitude, like he didn't just potentially hospitalize one of his classmates and crack the road by simply walking. He walked over to both of them and tapped their shoulders. Look, don't hold this against me. I'm supposed to be holding back. I don't feel like wasting any more of my energy right now. Koda and Uraraka were evidently confused before they were pushed to the ground by gravity. They each lay sprawled out on the ground, unable to move a muscle, as Chuuya took both earpieces and put them in his pocket. He sat on top of them and waited out the timer boredly. Villain team wins. Please reveal your base, then the young Uraraka 2 recovery girl. Dazai was up to fight again. Despite his complaints, he held an air of confidence that put Aizawa on edge. He didn't spare him a glance as he made his way to the city to claim a base. It would be less obvious this round since Dazai's opponents would be more on guard. The hero team would be Sato Rikido and Bakugo Katsuki. Sato had a transformation quirk that made him stronger when he ingested sugar. Bakugo, or Kaken, as Dazai had heard Midoriya call him, could make explosions from his hands. His special sweat meant that if Dazai dragged this out for too long, the explosions would become stronger. It was bothersome but definitely doable. Sigh, if only boss would have let me die. Dazai fake swooned, knowing full well that Chuuya was watching, but alas, I must finish this mission. Chibaiko could never live without me. He would die. And it was true, corruption would end his life if Dazai wasn't there to stop him. He could almost feel Chuuya's glare searing into him. Not long after, All Might told the hero team to enter. They quickly advanced in an attempt to draw Dazai out of hiding. Bakugo blasted mini-explosions in his hands, muttering obscenities. "Get out here, you mafioso wannabe!" he shouted. "I'm gonna blow your butt sky high." Dazai raised an eyebrow at the nickname. That was really the best he could come up with? He was, however, not far off. Bakugo," Sato began. "What do you want, shitty extra?" Bakugo interrupted. "I don't think the villain will show up if you threaten them." "What? Does he think he's better than me?" "More explosions." "Not yet." "I mean, come on Bakugo, they said they're professionals. They have more experience than us. If you don't think you're strong enough to fight him, go get yourself captured. I don't need a deadweight." "Not yet." Sato trailed behind Bakugo as he looked nervously side to side. His fist clenched around a cookie in anticipation. A carefully aimed paper airplane landed silently at the angry blonde's feet. It was decorated with a little chibi face of Dazai and cutesy writing saying, "Open me." Neither hero reacted for a moment before Sato hesitantly reached down to pick up the plane. Meanwhile, Bakugo braced himself as he scanned the area. "Show yourself." Ignoring him, Sato began to read. "Oh, it says, if you want to find me, tell Kaken to make the first guess. Does that mean anything to you? I thought only Midoriya-san called you that? Because I is a childish nickname. Don't call me that shitty villain." Bakugo screamed. "And I'm not going to listen to a stupid note." A pity," Dazai mused to himself. "He really ought to show me some more respect. Maybe he could have his tongue removed once the mission was over." That was a nice thought. A sudden sound from the rooftop had Bakugo racing up there in a minute. Sato followed him closely. He shoveled as much food into his mouth as he could while he waited for any sign of Dazai. The roof was rather bare, some potted plants here and there, and a bench. A broken bench, actually, but at least he had found the source of the noise. Bakugo let out a low growl as he caught sight of another slip of paper, this one a crane. "Kaken, what do you think would happen if a burst of wind were to knock you over? This shitty mafioso wannabe, is he trying to threaten me?" Bakugo exploded the wrinkled paper. A new one appeared a few meters away. "I did no such thing. Where the hell are you hiding, you coward? Come out and fight me like a man." Sato grimaced at the riled-up boy but didn't stop him. After a moment of hesitation, he walked to the far side of the roof in search of clues. Sato was suddenly overwhelmed with exhaustion. Why was he even bothering with this game? Dazai would win for sure, so what was the point? Even Todoroki's team did better than them. The voice surrounded him, whispered softly in his ear, sounding perfectly like his own, blending effortlessly with Sato's thoughts and encouraging him to give in. It would be so easy to just use his 2 guesses and end the match. But he didn't. He groaned in confusion and shook the thoughts away before picking up a paper that caught his eye. "Got you, Kurt." "What?" The instant he looked up from the note, he felt something wrapping around his neck from behind. It was stiff and warm and smelt strongly of leather. Cold wind blew on his chest as the edge got closer and closer. The belt cinched tighter and tighter as Sato fought furiously to stop his assailant to no avail. "Make your first guess and I'll let you go," Dazai commanded. "No. I'll escape on my own, you villain. As a bodyguard, I have many ways of getting what I want. I'm losing patience." Dazai frowned at Sato. He was already looking faint and he wasn't fighting very hard. If the students couldn't handle this much, what could they even do? He sighed in frustration before releasing one of his hands to tie up Sato's legs and arms. His buff form deflated at Dazai's touch, leaving an exhausted Sato struggling to breathe. Dazai was tempted to discard him at the entrance, but that probably wouldn't be considered very heroic. Then again, neither was choking out a student in a friendly match for training. Make a guess. 3. Sato glared as defiantly as possible from his position. What would Dazai even be able to do to him? It was a practice match. 2. CRP Dazai was really scary. It's only one guess, right? He managed to choke out. 1. The rooftop. Sato wheezed. "I guess the rooftop. I'm sorry if my methods are a bit rough. You probably won't be able to participate very well for the rest of the match," Dazai warned with a light smile. He shoved the earpiece in his pocket as a precaution. 1 down, 1 to go. Gritting his teeth, Bakugu trudged along the roofs in search of Dazai. No way in hell was he going to let that shitty extra win this match. His match. Ever since internships, Deku and shitty hair, and even round face had improved. So why was Bakugu stuck at the same level? "I'll kill that BSTRD, he muttered. Sato had left him on the rooftop to go to who knows where, and now Bakugu was stuck without a lead or the villain's whereabouts. Luckily, he hadn't been finding any more of those notes. That was concerning in its own right, considering Origami Notes had been following him for the last 5 minutes. Each one contained a short but annoying message that kept insisting that if Bakugu wanted a chance to fight him, he would have to waste one of his guesses. To hell with that. If he did that now, he would be letting the villain win his little game. Just where did Dazai go? Whenever he was near the starting point, he would get all those annoying papers, but now Bakugu felt on edge. No papers. No Sato. No footsteps but his own. It was too quiet. "Oi, villain. I know you can hear me," Bakugu called. Nothing. He looked around. Despite being on the roof, the compacted buildings made it difficult to get a good view. One building jutted out just a little higher than the rest. Dazai's first base. Maybe he would find a clue there. Bakugu ran on instinct, using his explosions to boost him. He quickly maneuvered between each building, narrowly avoiding balconies and street lights as he arrived at the apartment complex with ease. A note. "I was FNG right," he declared proudly. "Not here. Wrong place." "Hey, why is this note different? Worried I'm gonna catch you?" This note was different. It didn't tell him to guess his base, and Bakugu could only think of one reason as to why. This was his base. "I know you can hear me, so listen up extra. You keep telling me to guess where you're hiding, right? Then why is this note different? You must have been worried I would guess this place, weren't ya?" Bakugu looked ahead arrogantly as he continued. "This was your base last round, and nobody would expect you to use the same base twice. Even if they suspected it, they'd be too scared to guess it. And even if I'm wrong and I waste a guess, you still have to come out and fight me. It's checkmate, shitty villain." A voice rang out on his intercom. "Are you making a guess, Bakugu?" "Yeah, I guess the building I'm on right now," he grinned. Slow clapping echoed through the buildings as Dazai revealed himself. He looked no worse for wear than he had at the start of the match, but Bakugu was about to change that. "Impressive, it truly is Bakugu. I'm afraid you made the wrong decision though. The villain team wins once again. Please free young Sato and join us in the viewing room after revealing your base." What the actual F just happened? Bakugu had been so sure he was right. He only guessed once. He had it all planned out. It was supposed to be a checkmate. It was all that shitty Sato's fault. He ruined Bakugu's plan. In the monitor room, Chuuya was once again the only person who wasn't shocked. When Dazai arrived with Bakugu and Sato, The class erupted into chaos and questions which Dazai masterfully avoided. Many classmates seemed slightly uncomfortable after his display, but warmed up to him nonetheless. "I'd like to apologize once again for my methods, Sato-kun," Dazai said with a light bow. Sato rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. "Thank you, Dazai-san, I hope to learn more from you." Chuuya glanced over at Bakugo, who seemed to be sulking. "You did good, kid." "I don't need your pity," Bakugo growled. "Good thing I wasn't giving you any. If you wounded your pride, don't take it out on me. If anything, it's that BS that you should be angry at." Bakugo seemed grateful, but didn't say anything. Instead, he scowled and walked away from the main group. "Ha, you did well, young Dazai," All Might said with a pat to his back. For a split second, Chuuya thought he could see Dazai tense up, but it was gone before he could be sure. "I would prefer that you didn't touch me, All Might-san. My quirk is touch-activated and I don't want you to worry about what could happen. Now if you don't mind, I'm sure Izuku and Ida are waiting for you to start the match." He excused himself with a pleasant smile before sauntering to Chuuya's side. "What did you think of my performance earlier, Chuuya-kun?" Chuuya faltered, his lips slightly curling downwards. Dazai hardly ever called him something that wasn't an insult or meant to be seen as such. What response is he looking for? He must have figured something out. Probably waiting to see if Chuuya had noticed it as well. He hadn't. But he would never admit that. Might as well play it safe. "I think you already have the answer you're looking for, Dazai." He clapped his hands with a smile. "You're absolutely right. I guess you didn't notice it since you're such a slug dash." Chuuya swung at his partner's head, not caring that he was drawing attention from the other students. He was in the middle of strangling Dazai when he started whining for help from the other students. "Oh my god, Dazai-san, are you alright?" Uraraka asked. She looked uncomfortably from one partner to the other as she, Tiu, and Kirishima attempted to separate them. Chuuya resisted the urge to flip everyone off and let go, holding on a second more for good measure. "You two seem very similar to Midoriya-kun and Bakugo-kun Karo," Tsuyu commented. "So not manly, bro, you guys are partners," Kirishima added. Dazai swooned into Tsuyu's arms dramatically, his hand draped across his forehead. "Can't you guys see how abusive my little Chibaiko is to me? He nearly ended my life. Cut it out, shitty mackerel, you know you would have been overjoyed to die at my hands." Kirishima visibly tensed and Uraraka gasped quietly. "Is he really? Oh my god, what do we do? What if Chuuya dash? I swear to the god Dazai, if you make me out to be the criminal one more effing time dash." Dazai laughed. I was joking. No need to get so worked up again." Still skeptical, the three hero students dismissed themselves one by one. Uraraka leaned in at the last moment and whispered to Dazai about a hotline he could use if he was ever really in need. He respectfully declined but promised he would let her know if anything happened. Hero students. Not long after, Aizawa announced the start of the fourth match, Tenya Ida and Midoriya Izuku vs All Might. As the students crowded around the monitors, Chuuya and Dazai slipped away and into a hallway. Chuuya watched Dazai curiously for a moment and began to speak before he was cut off by a hand over his mouth. With his free hand, Dazai made a familiar hand signal. "Recorded. Cameras?" Chuuya signed back in their code. "No. A bug." One way or another, Dazai had discovered a recording device planted nearby so they couldn't talk freely. "So, what do you think of the students so far?" Dazai asked. He continued signing separately. "Boss called. When you were fighting. Is it the mission? They still have a lot to learn. I can see why they needed us," Chuuya sighed. "Yes. The villains are coming soon." "I agree, but they seem like quick learners. I'm sure it won't become an issue," Dazai responded verbally. "So soon? Idiots." "I hope not," Chuuya mumbled. "We should go back. I'm sure they noticed we left by now." "What a good little dog, so eager to please." "Have you?" Chuuya presented him with a certain finger. "Not right now, Chu," Dazai teased shamelessly. Chuuya growled and stalked inside to hide his flustered expression. "Demon Biasur." As soon as the duo made it back inside, Aizawa called them over. Although he didn't glance away from the monitor, Chuuya knew he was expecting no nonsense. "Chuuya." "Dazai," Aizawa began, I trust you have made some observations about my students? See me in the morning, I'm sure you will be tired after all these matches. It's nothing we haven't done before, isn't that right, Hatrack? Dazai grinned. Would after classes work better for you? Aizawa carefully scanned the two, searching for any sign of weariness or deception. Alright, wait till 5 after so the students can leave. Deal. Dazai agreed. Chuuya just nodded. That's all, you may leave. Chuuya stifled a laugh. He was acting like he was above them. If only Aizawa knew just who he was treating like subordinates. That would be a lovely day. All their betrayed expressions and shock. Maybe someday after the mission. Go out with a bang, right? Judging by the classmates cheering, Ida and Midoriya were doing well. All Might, like an absolute idiot, was playing defense. He stood in front of his base the whole time and left many openings. It was like he wanted them to win. Is that how Chuuya and Dazai were supposed to have played? Too late for that now, he supposed. Recipro. Burst. Who calls out their moves in front of an enemy. In a final burst of speed, Ida managed to tack the tracker onto All Might's right side. Ooh! They did it, someone cheered. Ida was so fast just now. Like Sonic Dash. When Aizawa declared the hero team's win and told everyone to quiet down, Dazai walked to a small group of students to make small talk. Chuuya sked at his obvious interest in the rowdier students but figured it was a part of whatever twisted game he was playing. Shiro Hanta and Kaminari Denki froze in place as they suddenly remembered, holy see you were up now. They rushed to get ready and Aizawa followed after with an exasperated groan, quickly looking at Dazai and Chuuya. Please make sure Team F is ready for the next match before this one ends. One after the other, the next 2 matches finished with wins for the hero team's bag. Finally, it was Chuuya's turn. Hagakure Toru and Yaoyorozu Momo. Yaoyorozu was smart for a rich kid. She just lacked initiative, and that made all the difference. She was hesitant to take the lead, but compromised on a plan with Hagakure. Chuuya watched them debate on how they should go about finding him. We could do a sneak attack? If we get the tracker on him, maybe we can end the fight early. Hagakure suggested. No. I think Chuuya-senpai will be hard to sneak up on. If we set up a diversion, maybe? Yaoyorozu mused to herself. Not that I think you have a bad idea, I just dash. Nah, I don't mind Yamamo. You're like, super smart, so I trust you, the invisible girl replied, pumping a fist or glove into the air. Yaoyorozu flushed pink in embarrassment from the compliment before she continued. Okay. I can give you a flash bomb and dark glasses, I'll just need you to get behind him and set it off. Then I'll make a slingshot and try to land it on him. We only have 3 trackers, so we have to make it count. When both agreed, Chuuya decided he had waited long enough. He had let them come up with a plan and given them a solid 2 minutes. No point in staying bored any longer. With a nod of his head, dozens of rocks flung at the heroes from every direction. Duck! Hagakure squealed. She ran quickly out of sight, pressing back against the wall of the nearest building. Yaoyorozu tossed a flash grenade to her before taking a hiding spot of her own, slingshot in hand. Oh, I quit hiding. If you want to beat me, you had better try for my base. No plan of yours is gonna win against me, Chuuya taunted. A few more rocks launched themselves at their hiding spots but only embedded themselves into the wall. Cat and mouse? A presence behind him urged him to move out of the way, and the flash bomb exploded where he previously was. He was confused at who could have done it before he caught a glimpse of floating gloves. He dodged once more when a small, circular device shot past him. A curse was heard close by. Toru! The invisible girl lunged at Chuuya, who dodged easily again and again. The way he moved was rather mesmerizing. His hands never left his pockets, he simply jumped back and forth and side to side as the heroes tired themselves out. He didn't even attack, not really. Not the same way he had his first group. Chuuya was holding back and they knew it. Yaoyorozu grunted in frustration as she failed to land the final tracker. Are you guys done yet? Chuuya scoffed. They didn't have a chance to respond, quickly being pinned to the ground. Hagakure attempted to free herself once more when Chuuya looked away but ultimately failed. She went limp as she surrendered to his grip. I admit I am no match for your strength, Chuuya-senpai, Yaoyorozu frowned. I believe it is important to know when to walk away to avoid further harm if you stand no chance. Hagakure gasped. In betrayal, Yamamo. Please forgive me, Toru-san. All Might Sensei, I surrender this match. Momo looked down in shame. It's okay, Yamamo. Ark darn it. I surrender as well. Hagakure relented. Chuuya gave them both a pat on the back to tell them good job, and All Might declared his win, once again. By the time every match was finished, most of the students had recovered enough to go change in the locker rooms. The few that remained with Recovery Girl were thanks to Chuuya and All Might. Since Dazai and Chuuya weren't held back by Aizawa this time, they were in the locker rooms at the same time as the others. The boys' locker room wasn't as loud or disorganized as Dazai expected. The only time he had ever seen one was in the movies he had watched as a kid. Now that he was older, he realized how impractical those movies were. They always had the same cliché endings and took away from the time he could have spent training. Dazai looked slowly from locker to wall to bench and decided this was nowhere close to ideal for undressing. Nosy hero students would only question him and become suspicious at the amount of bandages around his body. Mori was going to be very displeased if the students were wary of Dazai after just the first day. Chuuya-san, can you teach me how you fight? Kaminari asked animatedly, bouncing on his feet. You were so cool. And you were moving so fast. I wish I would have gotten to fight you. I must admit, you are a very formidable opponent, Nakahara-senpai. Ida bowed. As are you, Dazai-senpai. Chuuya glanced at Dazai, almost like he was asking for permission. How amusing. Dazai didn't give him the satisfaction of a response and simply turned to Ida with a quick, thanks. I thought I told you to call me Chuuya. And I'm not taking on any protégés at the moment. I've got to keep track of you all. That doesn't give me much time for myself, Chuuya finally said. Some of the boys looked interested at the choice of wording for protégé. He should have said he wasn't taking on any students or interns instead. Oh, as bodyguards we don't get time to ourselves, Chibaiko. That was one of the first things they taught us there, remember? Dazai interrupted unhelpfully. He watched in amusement as Chuuya's brain seemed to reboot to come up with a proper response that wouldn't counter with the cover story. Well, they also said it's important to take care of ourselves. Chuuya weakly countered. But that was only meant for during training, not on duty. Didn't you pay attention to the basics at all? Say shit like that one more time and I will steal your little protégé from under your cape. How he wanted a Kudogawa. Unfortunately, he was a simple-minded, weak subordinate who could only become useful with Dazai's training. Chuuya was too soft. A Kudogawa would never unlock more than half his potential under Chuuya's guidance. I can't have you doing that just yet. He is still training after all, Dazai smiled. Ooh, you have a mentee? Siro piped in. What's he like? How long have you been training him? He's very dedicated to his training, just like you all. Although he is a bit difficult at times, he knows how to respect his superiors. That's very important at our agency, informed Dazai. He sounds super manly. Kirishima beamed. Maybe you can bring him here for experience, like an internship. Ojiro nodded his head. He sounds interesting. I wonder if we could spar with him. Now, as fun as that sounds, I'm sure Aizawa-sensei is getting impatient. He leaned in and stage whispered. He looked very cranky earlier. The boys widened their eyes in panic as they realized their time limit was almost up. Within seconds, everyone had flung on the uniform and dashed out to class. Demon mackerel. What was that for? Chuuya glared. I don't know what you were talking about. Perhaps the hat did eat whatever brain cells Chibi had left. Because he's not making any sense, maybe it's because he's gone so long without wine. A quiet growl from the shorter had Dazai placing a hand on his shoulder in warning. I have a plan. So far it has been going flawlessly, but if you say something to mess it up. Dazai never finished his sentence and shoved Chuuya into the hallway so he could get dressed. The moment the door swung shut, Dazai sank down, back against the lockers. He rested his head between his arms as he inhaled the familiar scent of old bandages. He sat there for a minute, doing nothing, just breathing. He eventually got up and peeled away his knockoff mafia uniform. Each piece was folded crisply in a pile before the UA uniform was the focus of his attention. Dazai looked down at the bandages on his left arm to see speckles of crimson blood beginning to show through. Ah, shit. There was no time to take care of that right now, but Dazai supposed it didn't matter anyways. He was already planning on removing them come night, and if he was lucky he'd never have to worry about that again. Adjusting the sleeves of his uniform so that no bandages could show, he walked out of the changing room. Aizawa was waiting for him after all. So, I would like to hear your thoughts on my students so far. Whether it's skill or lack thereof, anything you may have learned about them today, Aizawa stated. His eye bags weren't much better than before and he was slumped in the seat of his desk. May I ask why? One would assume you already know them much better than we do, Dazai mused. Principal Nizu wanted me to get input from the two of you. For whatever reason, the both of you seem to have caught his interest, Aizawa said with a slight frown. Dazai already knew Nizu had taken an interest in him. From Nizu's perspective, he and Dazai were on similar wavelengths intelligence-wise. The demon prodigy knew better than that. He was smarter than the mouse rat dog bear whatever. He sighed. I see. Principal Nizu is a very smart creature. He must think highly of us if we caught his radar. He told me he personally hired you two for guarding one. I'm sure you've been on his radar long before now, Aizawa responded, carefully searching for any response from the duo that may raise suspicion. Dazai smiled pleasantly and let Chuuya respond for him. Yeah, no doubt. Boss said he knew the Izu from several years ago or some sheet like that. Quirking an eyebrow at Chuuya's bluntness, Aizawa quickly steered the conversation back towards his students. As professionals, do either of you have any thoughts or information that would help my students in the long run? Of course, anything to help out the client. Right, Chibi? Oh, shut the F up, Prodigy, we're doing business. Answer him properly, Chuuya grumbled. Fine. The Chibi is so impatient. A dog shouldn't growl at his anyways, Eraserhead. Sen, there were a few students that caught my attention today. What would you like to know? Pulling a chair away from one of the nearby desks, Chuuya straddled the backward seat and rested his chin on his arms. Aizawa watched, somewhat impatiently, and gave a short summary of what he was looking for. Well, I currently have a mental list of weaknesses for each student that I think would be quite important in making your students more efficient. If you were to train to lessen these weaknesses, it would make them more reliable to do their job, wouldn't it? Also, the students with more powerful and offensive quirks should participate in quirkless combat. This isn't a bias against the weaker ones, it's more that the students with stronger quirks rely on them the most. So when they have to fight someone with a quirk like yours, they become defenseless. Dazai was all too aware of the shock radiating off of the man in front of him. He could practically hear his thoughts. This kid, barely 15, can already make these kinds of mental calculations? It was absurd how goofing off for a single moment can lower someone's expectations of what you can do. To be fair, Aizawa likely thought Dazai was goofing off the entire time. That sounds like a fair assessment. I'll take that into account when I prepare future lessons. If you could provide me with that list as soon as possible, it'd be appreciated. Do you have anything to add, Chuuya-san? Chuuya shrugged. Intelligence and defense has always been more Dazai's thing. I'm the one behind offense. Aizawa seemed to accept that answer and began to speak until he was interrupted by Dazai, who looked sheepish by his mistake. Time to start the next phase. Dazai morphed his expression until he looked the perfect mix of pitiful, depressed, and bored. Ah, my bad. Although he was confused by what brought on his sudden change in mood, Aizawa didn't show it. He motioned for Dazai to continue. His eyes seemed to show more weight than any 15-year-old should have to carry. It was as if a part of his mask had fallen. The question was why. I just wanted to let you know we would be changing in our dorm from this point on. It's not that we aren't grateful for the opportunity to be seen more as a part of your class, but looking at it from a professional standpoint, Dazai trailed off and Aizawa noticed the way he carried an air of acceptance, like he expected he wouldn't really ever get to be a part of his class. It's really just better for us to not get too close with the clients. It's dangerous when people get connected to us. But you would be able to protect them if they were in danger, as would the rest of us pros, Aizawa argued. Dazai's eyes hardened, defenses visibly going up again. Our line of work is dangerous. We don't have time to be role-playing students. We have to always be prepared to protect your students. Really? I think it's better for you to be closer with the students. They would trust you more, no? Plus, it's good for kids to enjoy themselves a little bit. By this point, Chuuya had no idea what was going on but decided to just follow his partner's example as he wrapped the teacher around his thin little fingers. Aizawa didn't miss the way both Chuuya and Dazai widened their eyes in shock. Of course. They had been made useful for years in their home city. Had they even been given much of a childhood? To hell with the Mori agency, he was going to make sure these kids got to experience a proper life. While they still did part of their job at least. We will consider that, Aizawa. Thank you for your time. I believe it's time for us to leave. Chuuya considered bowing but decided against it and gave a nod of his head, boredly following Dazai to the dorm. Jesus, everyone here is so goddamn exhausting to talk to, Chuuya exclaimed, flopping onto his bed. Wow, I didn't know Chibi was religious. Go kill yourself or whatever shit you do while I'm sleeping. I'm tired, go entertain yourself. Chuuya flipped off the other boy and shoved himself under his sheets. His back was turned. Dazai watched, captivated by the small body curled under the sheets. Regardless of how many times Chuuya told Dazai to kill himself, he trusted him. At the very least much more than any other person in the Port Mafia. His back was turned. To someone who was very much a threat. Dazai didn't know it was possible for someone to trust him to that extent, and yet, he decided to send a quick report to Mori, only so he wouldn't be as likely to bother him tomorrow. 1751 XX/XX. We successfully gained the trust of all the students in Class 1A. I'm sure you already know most of this, but I'll tell you anyway. Our supervisor is Pro Hero, Eraserhead, who has a quirk with similar properties to that of No Longer Human. We participated in combat training and fought 1 versus 2 against the students. Chuuya and I won every match and are positively viewed by everyone we have met so far. I'll report more when there is an update. Good enough. He waited another hour or so in silence before doing anything. Do not disturb sign hung outside his door to deter any students from knocking while he was busy. Dazai slipped out from under his suffocating covers, careful not to hit any of the creaky floorboards. His bandages suddenly felt scratchy and rough against his skin. Dazai craved the feeling only a cold blade could give him. He was done with being patient. Checking one more time that the door was locked, he shut himself in the bathroom. Fumbling for his things under the sink, his hands clasped around a scalpel and bandages. The scalpel fit perfectly into his hand, almost as though it was made just for him. His breath quickened, sitting himself slowly down into the empty bathtub, and Dazai pictured himself drowning peacefully in the night. The bloodied bandages came off without much of a fight, and he watched blankly as they fell softly into its own little pile. In the soft lighting, every little scar glowed. White lines made their way up and around the boy's arm, disappearing under the sleeve of his sleep shirt. Here and there lay bullet and stab wounds, but he focused on the little white lines. On one arm, fresh slices had been reopened, likely during his matches, and dripped down his arm into the tub. Dazai smiled to himself, a deranged, unnatural smile. The scalpel dug into his skin, a soft gasp drawn out at the crimson flood. He dragged the blade across pale flesh again and again and again, relishing the blissful feeling he could get just from a little pain. 2, 6, 7, 12. Dragging the scalpel once more in a single line that crossed through every tally, he let it clatter to the tile floor. Red stains coated the bottom of the tub in a thin stream. Dots of blood scattered here and there from the slices. It. He was already feeling quite lightheaded from the blood loss. It unfortunately wouldn't be enough to die, but if anyone walked in on him it would cause quite the disruption. Dazai groaned in annoyance, soaking a strand of toilet paper to wipe the blood off his arms. The cold water felt foreign on his skin. When he went to wrap his arm once more, he realized he probably would have been better off with a little gauze. The nurse lady would have some, but nothing from the school could be truly reliable. Plus, from what he had seen so far, she would insist on doing it for him, and that would be a long conversation he didn't want to have. The walk from the bathroom to the closet was more difficult than it should have been. The creaky floorboards were easy enough to avoid, but it was hard not to wince when his arm hit the foot of Chuuya's bed. The short boy stirred, flipping to his other side before snuggling back into the sheets. Dazai cautiously opened the closet door and pulled out a second roll of bandages in hopes it would be enough if the first layer bled through. Soon enough, he was laying down in his own bed. The blanket was too heavy, the pillow was too warm. And his voice. He was wasting so much of himself on this important of a mission. Mori should have sent somebody more capable. Maybe back in his shipping container, Dazai could die peacefully. As peacefully as one could when in the mafia at least. He missed the simplicity of the small white container. The way it changed temperature with the seasons and furniture he could count on one hand. Not yet. Sleep never found Dazai, but he was content just waiting for the morning. Aizawa tried to figure out why Nizu had called for him so late at night. Needless to say, he struggled quite a bit. It was almost an hour after school ended and no other staff was supposed to be at the school except for Namuri, Hizashi, and a few others. He knocked on the door to Nizu's office, and a polite "come in" was heard almost immediately. "It's nice to see you so quickly, Aizawa. I hope your day has been pleasant." Nizu sipped on a cup of tea, adjusting a few minute details on his desk. "It has gone well enough. Get to the point, please, Nizu." The small creature chuckled. My, impatient are we? I do mean to apologize though, I'm sure you had other things to do so soon after school ended." Aizawa went to remind him once more but was cut off before he could say a word. "Yes, I wish to talk to you about the student bodyguards." Sit, we have much to discuss." Aizawa made himself comfortable and looked down at Nizu expectantly. Of course the new students were the topic. Maybe Nizu would help him give the two some semblance of a childhood. As I always do with new staff, I've been looking further into Dazai's and Chuuya's career as bodyguards. I think you'll find my research quite interesting. Do elaborate. I have some things I would like to share with you about them when you're done, Aizawa agreed solemnly. I thought so. Well, I used to know their boss from some time ago and pulled in a favor. He is the head of an agency known as the Mori Agency and they produce many promising heroes. Think of them as the UA of that place. Aizawa frowned. And where exactly is that place? Nizu leaned in mischievously and spoke like a schoolgirl talking about her crush, Yokohama. What? You expect me to believe that those two came from Yokohama? The place no one can enter or leave? The place run by criminals? I do. And I have found much evidence to support it. Because of this, I would like you to keep a closer eye on them than before. We never know what they may be willing to tell us. Or even what they have experienced, so please, don't push them to say too much. Nizu tapped a few papers on his desk and held them out to Aizawa. These are important files on your new students that I believe you will find useful. They were provided to me directly by Mori-san. Of course, I'll keep track of them. I would also like to make a request regarding Dazai and Chuuya's behavior. I'm listening. Mornings were always unpleasant, but waking up with a bandaged maniac hovering over you was definitely worse. The brown-haired boy seemed to inspect Chuuya's face, delighted by the flutter of his overly sensitive eyes at the harsh lighting. With a grunt, Chuuya shoved Dazai off of him and quickly attempted to regain his senses. The slug is awake. Oh, what a shame. I thought he might never wake up. Dazai dramatically sighed and threw himself into the pile of pillows he had somehow stolen from Chuuya and put in his own bed. I need my fucking sleep, he grumbled, sprawling out on top of the blankets. Nope. Dazai popped the peep sound at the end, jumping back over Chuuya. It's a school day, so students have to be there 1 hour from now. But we aren't students, so we get to be there early. Scrambling out from under Dazai, his eyes widened in realization. Of course, that meant a water bottle was flung at Dazai with full gravity. Dazai stuck out his tongue and ducked out of the way, leaving Chuuya with a head-sized crater indented into the wall that he had no idea how he would explain, a crumpled plastic water bottle wedged in by its side with water dripping down the wall. All of a sudden the bandaged boy froze, his hand slowly touched his cheek, and when he pulled his hand away there was blood. His eyebrow arched in mild surprise. Neither were given time to prepare before 3 familiar students barged into their dorm, concern dripping richly. What happened? Uraraka breathed, hands resting heavily on her knees. Midoriya looked at them with worry painted all over his features. Are you alright? We heard a really loud crash and then a thud. As class vice representative, it is my duty to check on everyone. Can you tell me what happened? Yaoyorozu spoke calmest out of all of them. Her eyes focused on the whole room, observing every little detail. It was a rather incriminating scene. From an objective standpoint, it might be pieced together as domestic abuse. A large crater in the wall with a flat disc of sorts sticking out of it, liquid dripping from the crater. Dazai, standing almost directly in the path of the object, blood on his hand and cheek. And Chuuya, sitting on the edge of the bed, quirk still glowing red-orange with an irritated expression. For 5 solid seconds, Uraraka and Momo looked around nervously, attempting to piece together the scene. Dazai made no move to stop them, just liked the blood off of his thumb. And then it clicked. Dazai-san, did Chuuya do this? I'm so sorry, we should have believed you. We shouldn't have brushed it off as a joke. Uraraka's panicked venting startled Midoriya into realization, and he threw his body in front of Dazai as if he could protect him. Momo glared angrily and took out her phone to start snapping pictures of the scene. Chuuya just knew Dazai had no intention of fixing this himself. Dazai hummed with pursed lips, "Ah yes, that is what happened, isn't it? What, you too, shitty mackerel." The ginger flipped him off and stretched his legs, standing up slowly. The trio's eyes widened at the admittance to the scene. He supposed it could have been considered abuse around here, whether or not it was the norm in Yokohama. How long has he been doing this? Are you in danger right now? Are you two together? Did he hurt you anywhere else? Midoriya began rapid-firing questions in hopes one of them would be answered. He hardly thought it was the time to be talking about whether or not his bodyguards were dating, but it was even more important to figure out if this was a case of domestic abuse. Dazai didn't say anything, deciding how much he wanted to reveal. If he answered truthfully, it might lead to an investigation on Chuuya and himself. Should he make it look like abuse even though it technically was, or should he help the chibi out and say Chuuya had some sort of mental issue causing intense mood swings? On second thought, both of those would make the students hesitant to be near Chuuya. He really loved to make Dazai's job harder, didn't he? Yaoyorozu suddenly had her camera trained on Dazai, recording. Please be honest, Dazai-sen, we just want to help you. Chuuya attempted to snatch the phone from Yaoyorozu without much force, but was stopped by her holding it above her head. He growled, "You're kidding, right? Whatever happens between us is none of your business." Uraraka choked on her words, attempting to get a response from Dazai, who had decided on just staying silent. "We're heroes, of course it's our business if you're abusing Dazai-san. You can't do whatever you want just because you're strong." Chuuya groaned in annoyance, "That's literally none of your business. Now leave me and my partner alone so that we can head to class." When none of the 3 trainee heroes responded, Chuuya signed to his partner in an attempt to save the situation. "You're the only person they will listen to." Dazai signed back with little emotion. "You are abusing me." "Oh, what the F, Dazai," couldn't be easily expressed in their sign, so he said it out loud. "Just end this, mackerel. They will hold an investigation." "Yes, they will. Can you not lie?" "I can. You better have a plan." "I don't." Chuuya blinked, stunned. Was he being serious? They wanted to hold an investigation on Chuuya abusing Dazai. This wasn't any different from how they usually acted, but Dazai was smirking when the trio faced his partner. He flipped Chuuya off and went back to playing pitiful teenager with a rough past. "God effing damn it. Do whatever you want. But it had better not be a waste of our time dash. My name is Detective Tsukachi. I will be in charge of this interview." The dark-haired man flashed his badge and placed a recording device in the center of the table. Aizawa held tight to a notepad. "My quirk is called polygraph. I can instantly tell the difference between truth and lie. I can also tell when you are attempting to deceive me. My quirk will be active for the entirety of this interview, and every response you give will be kept for the record." Oh God! How had Chuuya ended up here? This was so incredibly annoying, and he barely resisted the urge to facepalm. "Be respectful, do not be suspicious." "Yep, is that all?" Detective Tsukachi's brow twitched before nodding and flipping a miniature notepad to the next page. The questions will begin now. What is your name? Be respectful. Do not be suspicious. It's Chuuya. Don't you already know this? Truth. These questions are mandatory for all investigations. Please bear with us. How old are you? Oh, Mori had lied about this part, hadn't he? 15. Truth. Chuuya couldn't hold back his sigh of relief that he was right. His quirk only knows the difference between what the person thinks is the truth and what they lie about. So if Chuuya interpreted the question as, "What is your age on paper?" instead of, "How old are you legally?" Detective Tsukachi's quirk couldn't tell the difference. "Where do you live?" the detective asked, watching patiently for Chuuya to respond. "Isn't this already on the record?" Chuuya huffed irritatedly. "Just answer the question, Nakahara." "I live in the UA dorms." "Say nothing more, nothing less. Be tight-lipped. Do not reveal any unnecessary information." "Truth. However, I meant before you were contracted at UA." Detective Tsukachi looked up to where Aizawa was standing to check if he was writing the information down but turned back when Chuuya started to respond. "I am not allowed to tell you that." "Truth. I'm going to need you to elaborate on what you mean by that, kid." He brushed a hand through his hair, staring directly at Aizawa. "Our boss does not want us to share that information. We could face consequences for doing so." "Truth." Both adults shared a worried glance. This time it was Aizawa asking the question, "What kind of consequences?" "Anything from a demotion to nothing. Never mind, it isn't important." Chuuya frowned at his slip-up. "That's a lie. Kid, this is becoming a worrying case. You do not have to answer that question at this very moment, but we will be coming back to that later." "I don't care if you ask later. I won't be able to tell you any more than I already have." Detective Tsukachi narrowed his eyes, flashing a hand signal to Aizawa. "Half-truth. Listen, we still have to interview your partner. We can ask him about this if you don't tell us what we need to hear. Until then, keep answering our questions." Chuuya leaned back in his chair, hoping they had forgotten the original reason he was brought here. Unfortunately, he had no such luck. "We will now move on to the second set of questions. They are adaptable to your responses and will last however long it needs to. Have you ever intentionally harmed your partner Dazai Osamu?" There was no way to misinterpret this one, but Dazai wasn't the only person who could throw somebody under the bus. Yeah, not the only one who's done it though. Life's rough that way." Chuuya smirked. "Time to paint a new picture for the staff." "Truth. Do you mean that you are not the only person who has hurt Dazai, or that you are not the only person causing harm in your relationship?" "Both. Everyone hurts everyone where we're from, every man for himself, and all." He watched in satisfaction as Aizawa's expression turned cold, as if Chuuya had just confirmed his worst fear. "Truth. I see. Could you tell us how the two of you met?" Aizawa seemed to watch in anticipation for Chuya's response. "I was on a mission for the S, in a different agency. Dazai was on a mission in a rival agency. I kicked him to the ground, beat him up a bit. He made the BGMI agency betray me and I joined Dazai's group, the Mori agency. I even got a stab scar to prove it." "Truth. I can tell you are omitting some information, but I'll leave it alone for now. Do you harm him regularly?" "By this I mean intentionally harming him." The detective looked in morbid curiosity. Time to fix this whole abusive mess. Chuuya decided it was time for a little acting. He certainly wasn't as convincing as shitty Dazai, but he could put on a show. Chuuya flinched, tensing up every visible muscle. His eyes widened just a fraction, refusing to say a thing. He kept silent. Aizawa nodded permission to Tsukachi for whatever he was trying to do, and he stood up, chair screeching as it was pushed away. Chuuya didn't even have to fake the wince that showed on his face. Curling in on himself, he muttered, "It wasn't me. I didn't do it, it wasn't me. I'm sorry I didn't try to do it." This shocked the two across from him, seeing this confident young boy, brimming with talent, break down. His breaths were thick and heavy, as though he were reliving some horrid memory. His eyes constantly changed from clear to foggy and confused. "Nakahara, hey, Nakahara. Listen to me, Chuuya Nakahara, I am right here. I am not going to hurt you, but I need you to calm down or you might hurt yourself." Chuuya would never go as far as to hurt himself when he was acting, But he did his best to look at the detective shaking his shoulders. For good measure, he kept himself looking out of it for another 3 minutes, flinching at every touch. Aizawa began slowly. He kept his hands positioned in front of himself carefully to show Chuuya he meant no harm. Please don't ask what that was, Chuuya pleaded, steely eyes filled with caution. Aizawa hesitated and shook his head. We need you to tell us what happened, kid. Was it the question? Partly. Truth. Now, I'm sorry that this brought up some memories and I'm sure you would rather be anywhere else right now. However, you just need to answer 2 more questions and you're free to go for now, deal? Tsukachi stayed silent. Chuuya was still, not responding for nearly a minute before hesitantly nodding his head. Have you or anyone in your workplace ever been abused? What is your definition of abuse? Someone intentionally mistreating the other with cruelty or violence, and usually it is repetitive and happens more than once. The detective and Aizawa shared another look that Chuuya didn't bother deciphering. He was glad for the interview being almost over, but now that Tsukachi had clarified the question, it would be hard to answer without looking suspicious. Chuuya had never been abused in the port mafia. Mistreated maybe, but not abused. The sheep didn't count as abuse, right? It was all one huge FING misunderstanding. But before all that, no. Truth, that is very good to know, Nakahara-sen. Here's the final question I need to ask, although you may have been expecting it. What consequences could you face by telling us where you used to live? God damn it, Chuuya muttered. I'm sorry, but I really can't tell you that. I don't feel like taking risks. I think that may be a wise choice for now. Thank you for your time. I apologize for the misunderstanding. Detective bowed and opened the door with a grimace, likely annoyed he couldn't get the answers he wanted. When Chuuya reached his dorm, he scowled at the patched-up wall, perfect and smooth as though nothing had even happened. DMN students? Weak fucking, shitty BS. I hate this place. F you to Dazai. Dazai sat on his bed, the largest sheet-eating grin plastered to his face. He said nothing but offered up a small CD-like disc. On it had, "You were late to work, Chibi. Great job," written in red ink. It was the DMED water bottle. And that wasn't ink. No. Never. No effing way. You don't really have a choice, Chuuya. He gave the order. Aizawa thought, watching the bickering duo from a distance. Despite having just arrived at the teacher's lounge, he had more questions than answers. God, I hate the executives sometimes. Don't forget, you're talking to one dog. Now follow your emser like a good little pet and don't ask questions. Yeah. I know the drill, let's just get this over with. No matter how suspicious their conversations were, Aizawa was never able to act on them. Information about these two was crucial and he had just gained another tidbit. Dazai was an executive of something. Possibly his agency. They had just gotten orders from one of these executives, and Chuuya was obviously against whatever it was. The fact that Dazai was an executive anywhere was concerning in its own right, but pair that with their seemingly abusive relationship and the cracks Aizawa had seen in their work personas, the Mori agency was definitely worth looking into. It took him a moment to realize that both boys had gone silent and another to realize that they were staring right at him. Chuuya. Dazai. You're early, Aizawa huffed with a nod of his head. We could say the same thing about you, Eraserhead. Dazai raised an eyebrow in question. I'm a teacher, I have to be here before the students, Aizawa lied smoothly. It wasn't like he had never arrived to class on time, just not during the school year. Well, Dazai smiled, I'd say you made it on time then. Yeah, how long you been there? Chuuya scoffed. Not very long, I'm sure. Dazai's eyes narrowed and Aizawa was quick to assure him that it had only been a minute or so. He couldn't stop his eyes from trailing down to Dazai's bandages, encasing his neck and arms. Of course it was. But you sound a little panicky, Eraserhead. Are you hiding something? Oh, if off, Dazai. You know exactly what you're doing, Chuuya said with a kick to Dazai's shins who didn't bother dodging. But Chibi, you're ruining my fun. He pouted. The pro-hero let out a sigh that was a mixture of relief and surprise at how quickly the pair had gone from business mode to school children. No kid should already have the experience these two did, but now he could only hope to gain their trust. I just came here for my coffee. You two can stay here as long as you want, just make it to class before the students. Actually, Aizawa paused. Don't worry if Ida is already there. He tends to try and get the most out of his time in UA. We will. Thanks, Aizawa, we'll keep that in mind. Dazai winked and moved out of the way. He swept his arm out dramatically as if to say, all yours. Aizawa glanced over to Chuuya, who was standing with his arms crossed and glaring harshly at Dazai. If he didn't have such bad hearing from years of work, he almost would have sworn he heard Chuuya mutter he wanted some coffee too. He made himself look as approachable as possible while he worked at the coffee machine. Aizawa knew he had plenty of experience with this kind of situation, but he was worried the two teens would refuse help. Once the first sip of bitter coffee hit his tongue, he waved a hand lazily and trudged out into the hallway. The dark fabric of his hero costume draped loosely on his figure. No students filled the hallway as Aizawa made his way to the classroom, but he began to second-guess his decision to take it slow. What if Chuuya and Dazai were in immediate danger? What if they would be punished for any mishaps at UA, even if it was the staff or students' fault? How long would Aizawa have to play the guessing game? Sheet. He muttered to himself, walking much faster than before, and suddenly changed directions. He could be late to class, it was nothing new. But this was way more important. Turn after turn, the hallway finally ended at a giant singular door with a silver plaque titled, Principal Nizu, in the center of it. His knock was urgent, but despite that, the petite voice on the other side still sounded annoyingly pleasant. Aizawa, I've been expecting you. The principal smiled. I need to discuss something urgent with you. The bodyguards, Chuuya and Dazai. Something might happen, Aizawa gritted. And why might that be? I'm sure I already know what you're thinking, but I would much rather prefer to hear you say it. Don't. Not right now, Nizu. They just got orders from someone higher up, and by the sound of it, it wasn't anything good, he explained. The urge to strangle Nizu's chirpy face was getting just a bit more intense. Yes, troubling indeed. Unfortunately, it is something I am unable to look into, Nizu mused. As part of the deal I made with their boss, we cannot investigate anything to do with his agency or the duo he sent us. It seems they have dealt with accusations before, but all charges were dropped nearly immediately. Intriguing, isn't it? Aizawa froze, completely dumbfounded. What? You agreed to that? That clause makes them even more suspicious. How are we supposed to do anything then? We aren't. It was all he could do to not wrap his capture scarf around Nizu's neck. His eyes twitched. However, there is always a way around rules. Every hero knows that. I have something, but I am waiting until I'm confident that it will work before I can share it with you. Until then, try and keep a low profile around them. We never know what involvement could harm them. Aizawa let out a shaky sigh, not nearly satisfied by the outcome but accepting it anyways. He took a moment to clear his mind and walked to his class. Dazai and Chuuya were positioned on the leftmost corner, out of sight to any oblivious person simply looking in. At least one thing was going right. In an instant, a large Cheshire grin was plastered on his face. You're all going to summer training camp. From his position in the corner, Dazai could feel the half-hearted betrayal radiating from the students. Cries of rational deception and, thank God, echoed around the room. It was fortunate, in Dazai's opinion, that they had arrived just after the exams. He didn't think he would have been able to stand watching those weaklings fight it out. At least he would finally get to leave UA. It would be a relief to finally part from UA's main campus. He'd been stuck there for so long. It was awful. He was being held there with zero way to leave in a way that wouldn't cause suspicion. Though a training camp was something curious. From the corner of his eye, he spotted Chuuya with a look that reflected his own, pure disinterest. He motioned at Chuuya, who almost immediately spotted him. He held up his hands. A training camp? How fun. What did you do? Why would you assume I'd do something? He smiled then. Chuuya scowled. Tell me. After class. Chuuya rolled his eyes, before turning his head away from him. With a sigh, Dazai did the same. Aizawa rattled on, explaining the details of the camp further. To which he started tuning out. What information was there that he couldn't figure out already? It was a camp to help them improve on their control over their quirks. That's simple. How bothersome. What did a man have to do to get his slacker lifestyle back on track? The start of homeroom went on as it had done on previous days. Aizawa would dump all the information before taking a nap. This time, there were hands slapping onto his desk, ripping him from his daydreams just like that. How cruel. Dazai-san, would you and Chuuya-san like to go shopping with us on the weekend? Mina asked, leaning on his desk, effectively taking over his space. Shopping? For what? Dazai inquired, looking up at the teen. Oh, like clothes and stuff. For the training camp. She explained, rattling off other things they could do, like grabbing lunch, hanging out and spending time getting to know each other. Sure. Me and the slug would be more than happy to come along, he said, a little too enthusiastic with his DLVRY. From a few feet away, Denki fist-pumped, accidentally bumping back into Bakugo, who growled in response. Is Kaken coming too? Dazai asked innocently with a little tilt of his head. Go to hell. I'm not going on an outing with the likes of you all, he muttered viciously. Well, that was a boring response. Dazai was already expecting Bakugo to say something like that. He had just hoped it would be a little more interesting. Mina slammed her hands on his desk once again. After school. 3:45. Don't be late. Godin and I need some wine, Chuuya grumbled, slamming open the doors to the closet, hinges creaking. Nearly half a week and he had yet to crack open a single bottle of red wine. Dazai would later joke about how that was a new record, but he didn't care at this point. What lunatic decided to give Chuuya the role of high school hero wannabe? Oh right, Mori-san. Just a shot or two. Muttering, Chuuya cracked open the bottle. He lifted the opening to the lips. The smell wafted in his nose. It was just as strong as he remembered. 3 days, almost 4. His headache swam through a river of stress. Nothing a quick swig wouldn't change. He threw his head back, the liquid seeping through his lips. It hit his tongue with its familiar, delightful taste. God, I needed this. The back of his hand wiped against his lips, any excess alcohol around his lips smudging against his hand. He sat down onto the bed, the mattress crunched underneath his body weight. The wine glass lay alone on the bedside table, lid tied on without much effort. A sigh escaped his lips. His hands slid down his face, his back hunched in a way that wasn't comfortable at all. After all the excitement the last several days brought, it was no wonder his brain wanted to shut down. Fighting was exhilarating. It always made his chest pump with all the emotions he needed to keep going through the day. Yet, there was that emptiness that followed. After playing mind games with the police in order to prove that he wasn't an abuser to Dazai of all people. His closed fist hit against his leg. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He blinked. Grabbing out the device, it felt big in his hand. He blinked again. Mako. We're going to meet 1A at the mall to shop. Read 3:12 p.m. Chibi. What? Since when? Read 3:13 p.m. Mako. Were you not paying attention? Mina asked if we wanted to go earlier. I said yes for the both of us. Read 3:15 p.m. Chibi. What? Read 3:15 p.m. Mako. 3. Read 3:17 p.m. Chibi. Are you kidding me? Delivered 3:18 p.m. Chibi. Dazai? Delivered 3:21 p.m. Chibi. BSRD. Delivered 3:25 p.m. 20 minutes to get ready. 20 minutes. Chuuya would have ignored taking a drink if he knew he was supposed to be meeting up with those UA brats. Sheet. He muttered under his breath, walking briskly through the room, hopping one foot while attempting to get his shoe on. Dazai. I'll kill you. When he finally arrived at the mall, a group of 15 or so kids stood crowded around each other. Dazai seemed to chat freely with them, pointing out interesting civilian quirks and complimenting outfits. Chuuya mentally gave him the finger before sauntering over. Oi, Dazai, what the F was that for? Oh, the chibi is finally here. Dazai cheered. Chuuya's mind blanked for a moment as he took a step just slightly too quick, freezing in place. When he started walking again half a second later, his godforsaken partner frowned and wafted a hand from Chuuya's face up to his nose and declared, Wine, Chibi-kun. You know better, It's illegal to drink at our age. Yeah, so is manslaughter, and look how that turned out, Chuuya bantered with a loud roll of his eyes. The few students near him that heard the remark paled immensely, eyes rapidly darting back and forth between the two. You shouldn't go making assumptions, should you now, eh? Dazai waved it off. It is but an inside joke from when we were at our agency. The Hatrak used to steal sips from our lovely boss's shot cups, and I once tackled him because it spilled on my favorite book. Chuuya-san. Ida scolded, arms chopping the air. That is very illegal. Are you trying to disrespect the nobility of UA? It always awed him how easily Dazai could come up with believable lies, even if he always ended up at the butt of it. He winced, bringing his attention back to the raging Four Eyes, who was delving deeper into his personal space by the second. Well, Mina exclaimed, stretching both arms above her head with a yawn, we're all here now, let's get started. I'm gonna go check out clothes. Like SWs had been flipped, everyone began preparing to split up, each having their own supplies to go look for. I've gotta find myself a giant duffel bag, Jairu announced. Yaoyorozu quickly offered to come with her. Denki, Hagakure and Ida needed to get rugged, outdoor shoes, and Mineta was searching for a lockpicking kit. What will you search for, Dazai-san, Chuuya-san? Tokoyami questioned. Chuuya pushed away the urge to walk away there, and then, the only answer he could come up with was one, but that had already been discussed, and not favorably. For whatever reason, Dazai was answering for Chuuya today. Chibaiko said he was going to buy me some bandages today. That's very nice of him, don't you think? Never mind, he knew why. He was just being an a-hole as always. Guess it was his turn to be the responsible one. Hey, you all better meet back up here within a couple hours, deal? Or else me and the mackerel are gonna be hunting you all the whole night. Yes, sir, Denki saluted mockingly. Dazai watched everyone disperse for a moment before grabbing a gloved hand and dragging Chuuya to the nearest aid supply shop. The shop was a simple establishment, a few aisles of bandages and antibiotics, first aid kits scattered here and there. Chuuya wrinkled his nose as the sudden smell of hospital and cleaning supplies filled his nostrils. Dazai, however, he looked like a little boy in a candy store. Hopping from shelf to shelf, scooping a variety of different brands of bandages in his arms before shoving them unceremoniously into Chuuya's. It was admittedly kind of endearing. Not that he would ever admit that to himself. He finally spoke. Did you know we have another target while we're here? What? Chuuya startled. It was such an obviously public place, and yet Dazai was speaking so openly about a target. I think it was something about that new group that's been on the news. They might be the ones who targeted the students not so long ago. Dazai frowned as he thought, but Chuuya could tell he was purposely omitting some information. No doubt another one of that BSDRD's stupid games. Yeah. Well, are you gonna tell me more, or are you gonna choose what you're buying so I can leave? Oh, I'm getting all of those. And you're buying, remember? F you. Chuuya stalked up to the cashier and placed each roll of bandages on the countertop, much nicer than Dazai had. At least Chuuya had respect, but goddamn the BSRD made it hard to do sometimes. He wondered if that target would play into whatever sick mind game Dazai had already begun. Armed with nothing else but his wallet in his hand, feeling a lot more empty than before, Chuuya mumbled something akin to curses underneath his breath. Dazai and his FANG bandage addiction, that a-hole. His face scrunched up. Every time he thought of the guy, he felt nothing but pure rage coursing through his chest. $50 short, from his wallet and alone again, what an outing. He passed by another clothing store. That was the 7th in a row. There really wasn't that much variety in this mall. What about camping gear? He saw one store so far in the entirety of the building. The new area he'd entered was crowded to high hell, barely anywhere to move freely. There were enough people for it to feel intoxicating, and the feeling wasn't the wine. Slipping through a group of more than 5, all walking in an obnoxious line, Chuuya found himself towards the center. He was about ready to turn around and find somewhere void of people. Wasn't that Midoriya? What the hell? Chuuya murmured. He was sitting there with someone he didn't recognize. Ragged clothing, hood over the eyes. The guy was bent over in a way that made it look like he was in an attempt to loom over and intimidate the kid. He couldn't make out the conversation over the loud chatter of them all. Either way, Chuuya didn't care in the slightest. So what if it was his job? He deserved to have free time himself. Pivoting on his foot, he turned directly to his right. He only made it 5 steps before glancing back again. A small, insignificant puddle was on the ground. No, those were tears. Midoriya was crying. If it was purely for the fact Chuuya had his job in mind, or maybe it was the alcohol he drank earlier, Chuuya couldn't tell for sure. He restrained himself from causing cracks in the concrete from every step he took. He was 15 steps away from the 2 sitting on the bench. The man had his fingers around Midoriya's throat, one finger kept off, freely in the air in front of his neck. He was 7 steps away from the 2 sitting on the bench. Was this what Dazai had been talking about? He was 2 steps away from the 2 sitting on the bench. The free finger from around Midoriya's throat bent right back to his wrist, making an inhuman sound as it bent back further. For eyes shot to him, on impact the hand pulled back hard. "Hey!" Chuuya drawled, directed purely at Midoriya. "Wa, Chuuya-san?" The tears pulsing at the teen's eyes didn't cease. Clumsily, Midoriya fell back, landing on the ground with a thud by how quickly he ripped away from the stranger. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes?" he scolded, quickly stepping in between Midoriya and whoever the hell this guy was. "Who's he? Do you know him?" The kid choked out, head shaking slowly, though it didn't seem like it was the whole truth, proven by the small curt nod directly after. Range was also on the ground, bent in on himself, cradling his hand towards his chest. He couldn't hear the words going through the man's head, though something in his eyes told him recognition. "I don't appreciate it when people threaten my classmates." He paused between the last 2 words, unsure what to call Midoriya out loud. "Get the hell out of here." Shakily, the stranger stood up, hand in his own hand, hugging his index finger, glaring at him with nothing short of malice. "Leave." He cracked his knuckles. It made a crunch similar to the sound of him breaking that same index finger just seconds prior. "Or else I'll make work of the rest of your fingers." Nakahara. Croaky voice, shaky from the immense pain the loser must be feeling. He didn't say anything further, holding a single hand up in mock surrender, taking short steps backwards. Who the hell was he? Someone up to no good, no doubt, but how did he know his name? Tamura, Midoriya choked. That was Tamura Shigaraki. "Who?" Chuuya asked, glancing back at the kid. Midoriya, who was now standing, looked at him as if he was crazy. No, seriously, who the F was that? With the bus packed full, 20 students, 1 pro hero, and 2 chaotic bodyguards were ready to leave. Aizawa had already had enough of Dazai's antics, and Chuuya, well, all he could say was he was glad Chuuya was there to stop his partner. The students were buzzing, chatting with one another about anything and everything. Jokes were passed, candy tossed to seats just behind them, games with no real rules. Aizawa sighed and sank into his seat, prepared to take a nap. This was their last chance for relaxation and fun after all. And then someone tapped on his shoulder. He glanced up at the figure leaning back on the side of his seat and resisted the urge to scowl. "What do you need, Dazai?" Eraserhead is being so mean. I just wanted to talk to him." Dazai clutched a hand over his heart and wiped a tear dramatically. "What do you need, Dazai?" Aizawa repeated. Did Dazai have to bother him now of all times? Fine, you caught me. Since me and the chibi won't have anything to do during the camp, we've decided to monitor what the students are doing. For protection purposes, obviously, he added after a second thought. At this, Aizawa frowned. What did he mean they weren't going to be doing anything? It was training camp and they were kids. It's not like they had nothing to be working on. That's not happening. Huh? But there's nothing to do there. The boy pouted with a groan, itching at his arms as he did so and revealing more bandages higher up his slim limbs. As bodyguards, you and Chuuya have to be in tip-top shape. If I'm going to trust you with my students' lives, he paused, you had better not slack off in your training. When we get to the camp, you are going to tell Mandalay how you two usually train at your agency, no details left out. We will recreate it however you need, but you are participating. Dazai grimaced at the sudden declaration, giving an awkward, about that, face and sulked back to his seat, but not before startling Mina and sending an open pack of Pocky flying into Aizawa's lap. God damn it, Dazai, he really was hard to help sometimes. If he weren't so worried about whatever danger the two were in, he probably wouldn't give a flying sheet over what they did during training camp. Just one more hour and I'll be stress-free until lunch. Did you say something, Aizawa-sensei? Hagakure questioned. He waved the question away. Don't worry about it, I'm just thinking out loud. Oh. Well, if you need something I'll be right here. Thank you, Hagakure, but it's nothing you need to worry about. After a few minutes, the exhausted teacher began to slip in and out of consciousness, fighting to keep enough awareness to keep track of his surroundings. He blinked. Yo, Aizawa. This is where the kids get off, right? I'm sure they'll be happy for a rest stop. The bus driver snickered as he always did each year. Loose rules, loose lips, that seemed to be his motto. With some difficulty, Aizawa stood up and ordered everyone out of the bus, cursing himself for falling asleep so easily. Ida, bless that boy, managed to file everyone out in an organized manner. As soon as everyone was off the bus, suspicion rose. Questions like, where are we, and what kind of rest stop is this, floated around. We stopped here for a reason, Aizawa announced. Hey Eraser. Sorry I haven't seen you in a while. He apologized with little emotion and turned back to the class. He knew what was coming, and it was nice to not be on the receiving end. The air grew tense, two grinning voices coming from seemingly nowhere introduced themselves. Rock on with these sparkling gazes. Stunningly cute and cat-like. We're the wild pussycats. Immediately, Midoriya started fanboying. He eagerly went on about how they were a famous group of heroes that shared a name, and how they had debuted around 15 years ago. He was stopped in his tracks when Pixie Bob whacked him on the head. We're 18 at heart. Right. Sorry. This whole area over here is our territory, Mandalay interrupted, addressing the rest of the group. Your lodging is at the foot of that mountain over there. So far. Kaminari shrieked. Uraraka mused. Huh. Then why'd we stop halfway? Let's get back to the bus? Hurry. Ciro chuckled nervously, nearly making a run for the bus doors, but it had already driven off. Everyone nervously pieced together the situation, dread and fear replacing the excitement they had been feeling not so long ago. Aizawa watched in mild interest. These were the same reactions the students gave each year, but this year's 1A was promising. And with the two mysterious students, it was bound to be interesting. He looked forward to seeing just how talented they really were. It's now 9:30 a.m., Mandalay purred, tail swaying tauntingly. I'm thinking around noon at the earliest. Panic set in, students started pushing their way as far as they could from the edge. Chuuya rolled his eyes and dragged Dazai to the main group, away from where they had been tucked away the last few minutes. Oh, shut up. Ah, crud, no way. Y'all reacting like you didn't expect something to happen. Can you honestly tell me you didn't find this rest stop suspicious? Everyone went silent. There. Now, just pay attention for once and don't drop your guard, Chuuya finished uncertainly. Without warning, the 22 were sent flying over the cliff, landing harshly on the dirt beneath them. Sorry kids. The training's already begun. From her perch in the monitor room, Mandalay watched the screen with Pixie Bob and Aizawa, her other partners preparing food. The dirt monsters were by no means easy to control, so it was rather interesting watching the students panic and struggle almost immediately after facing their first one. The monsters came one after the other, different sizes and strengths. Koda gave up after his voice didn't work on them. Chaos ensued beautifully. Until it didn't. Dazai and Chuuya, the transfer students, who she had just learned were actually bodyguards, remained unscathed. No matter what level of training you go through, it's still a challenge to fight against multiple opponents at once. These two were going against each one effortlessly. In such a way that shouldn't even be allowed for their age. Dazai simply walked ahead, every monster that touched him dissolved in a flash of blue light and students crowded around him for protection. He's like a giant bug zapper eraser? Pixie Bob joked, but remained intently focused nonetheless. Chuuya, meanwhile, was literally demolishing everything sent his way. Even when it was aimed at the students, a simple kick left it immobile. And yet the two still seemed relaxed despite it all. Chibi-kun. Imagine if this were like training at that place. It would be so much more fun. Seriously, you fed BSTRD? I wouldn't call being trained the way you did a Kutagawa fun. Gasp. You don't know that. I am the best mentor. Aizawa leaned in, startling Mandalay. There was some sort of fixation stemming from the pair that she had not yet figured out, but she knew it had something to do with whatever information was just dropped. So, the 15-year-old's a mentor? She queried. That's the first I've heard of it. My students were murmuring about some Akutagawa person the other day, but I had no other information. Aizawa reluctantly replied, It's important. That's all I know. She highly doubted that was all he knew. It was basically impossible for him to have missed Chuuya's offhand comment about Akutagawa's not-so-fun training. The cameras shifted, seemingly in the hands of one of the students. The three leaned in, waiting in anticipation to see who might have noticed them. When it shifted once again, a single brown eye filled the whole screen, angle shifting as they inspected it. It finally pulled back. Dazai held it out with one hand like he was taking a selfie and made a peace sign. Ah hey Eraser-san. Fancy seeing you here. He laughed as though he had just made the funniest joke and showed off the lens to his partner. What did you find this time? Another gun. Chuuya replied, and Mandalay hoped dearly he was being sarcastic. Was that supposed to be hidden? I noticed it a bit back, but I figured you would have wanted to see if the students noticed. Pixie Bob shrieked, Eek? Oh my goodness, I love these boys. I can't believe they noticed it. Aizawa sighed. Yeah, they've consistently shown just how capable they are. So I'm guessing Mandalay is there as well. Eraserhead wanted us to tell you about our training, but I don't think we should. I guess we'll see soon enough, bye. Chuuya snatched the camera for a moment to add, you better have lunch ready soon. We'll be there in about half an hour. Then the camera imploded. The screen went black. What the actual F-dashed? Osamu Dazai didn't like baths, and he didn't like showers either. So it was safe to say that this was the worst-case scenario for him. Hot springs, with a bunch of teenagers who he had no clue if they'd judge him until he really jumped the gun. He glanced over at Chuuya, and knew then that the teen was having the same issues that he was. They'd arrived at the camp long before any of the students had. In fact, they were almost an hour earlier than them. It would have been awesome to hold over their heads if the incoming doom wasn't lingering over Chuuya and his heads. A hot spring. That meant so much to the two of them compared to the rest of the teenagers, who were practically bounding towards the springs in order to get in first. Dazai. Scars were nothing new to either himself or Chuuya. They had their respective issues with their own bodies, and then their shared ones. The things that lingered in their minds at all times. The things that stuck against his limbs, constantly reminding him of what was there. Dazai. Osamu Dazai hated baths, he hated showers, he hated hot springs. He hated the vulnerability that came with it, and he hated the stairs. He hated everything that had to do with it, he hated it all. He hated this. Osamu. A squeeze on his shoulder made him blink. Raising his head slowly, he blinked again, then once again. His hands were at his sleeves, and they were shaking. What? Dazai answered, his voice wavering in a way it rarely did. Chuuya's hand did not leave his shoulder, and as the other teen squeezed it again, he shook it off with a shrug. What is it? Let's go. The ginger said, confident in his tone. He tugged Dazai's sleeve and started walking towards the camp, in the opposite direction of the hot springs. Dazai found himself inclined to follow. What about? His voice trailed off, and he clamped his mouth shut. Chuuya didn't answer, he didn't say anything. He didn't look twice at his shaking hands, nor how his voice wavered and he paused for too long. We're bodyguards, Chuuya said, walking through the empty-looking surrounding area. Once so full of life with the students filling up the area. Now that they were all gone, it looked like a ghost town. Make the excuse that it's not professional to be exposed like that around our clients. And if they question that? Dazai asked, though it was a stupid question. They were the professionals, They got to decide what was inappropriate or not. They can SCK it up, Chuuya said with a frown. He grabbed onto Dazai's sleeve, dragging him through the camp. It really doesn't matter. Yeah. Dazai mumbled under his breath, digging his hands into his pockets. His gratitude was left unspoken, hanging in the air like a cough or sneeze. Chuuya, Dazai. A rough voice called out, and it brought them out of their comfortable conversation. Chuuya craned his neck back, watching the incoming intruder. What are you two doing out here? Oh, browsing. Dazai spoke nonchalantly, hands shoved further into his pockets. He felt his nails digging into his palms. He didn't even wince. Chuuya elbowed him roughly in the shoulder. We're just taking a look around the camp, explained the former, turning his body to face Aizawa. It's good to get a good idea of the surrounding area, is it not? Of course it is. Aizawa said, taking a couple steps closer to the two of them. But shouldn't you be in the hot springs with the students? Nope. They said in unison, one more cheerfully than the other. Aizawa frowned, raising a brow. May I ask why? It's not professional. Aizawa. Dazai bobbed his head, pronouncing the letters within the man's name with exaggeration. Think a little. A hand was slapped over his face. What he was meaning to say. Chuuya gave him a glare. It's a conflict of interest, surely you understand? Pausing, silence enveloped the three of them. Aizawa slowly nodded after several seconds. I do. He shook his head. Either way, I have another matter to discuss with the two of you. That is, training while we're at this camp. It's an opportunity for not only the students, but for the two of you as well. Aizawa said, starting his spiel of information. Dazai took a second to make sure he didn't space out. Okay, so what do you suggest? Dazai frowned, absently leaning against Chuuya. He felt another squeeze. He ignored it, kicking at the back of Chuuya's shoes. His palm hurt. Like I said earlier, we'll try to recreate the training at your agency. We just need the details of what that entails. Aizawa explained, tugging at the scarf upon his neck. We'll do our best to provide it for you, we just need your insight. Oh, awesome. Dazai clapped his hands together, mock enthusiasm fueling his tone. We'll just need guns. Dumbass. Chuuya kicked his ankle, rolling his eyes. They're not going to provide that for us. If they can't get us live targets to fight against, what can they do? He folded his arms, turning his head to Chuuya. It's nothing like Yokohama here. Dazai huffed at Chuuya's shove. That we will not be providing either one of those. Aizawa's expression noticeably shifted as he glanced between the two of them. Besides, you don't have permits to use those. Dazai and Chuuya shot each other a look. You don't have gun permits, right? Not here at least. Chuuya shrugged, sticking his hands back into his pockets. We'd have to think about our training more. I'll get back to you later. No response echoed through the air from the hero, staring at them like they were clinically insane, which was a fairly good assessment. Dazai huffed. Are we done here, Aizawa? Yeah, I still want to map out the camp. Chuuya leant his head back, looking towards the hot springs. Shouting filled the area around them. And maybe get away from that. Eggs so noisy. He stuck his tongue out, grinning when Aizawa stared at him with a blank face. He raised his hand, snapping his fingers. Hello? Earth to Eraserhead? You're free to go. Aizawa said, turning around to leave. What's his problem? Dazai whispered into Chuuya's ear, speaking as soon as the hero turned the corner. Probably because you're being fucking weird. Chuuya stepped on his foot, grinning when the former cried out in mock pain. His expression fell afterwards. Seriously though. Swinging on his foot, Dazai just shrugged. He's suspicious of us anyways. But, blah blah blah. Can't hear you. He stuck his fingers into his ear, walking away with a quick pace. You childish a-hole. Aizawa walked back into the cabins. Mandalay stood off to the side, attending to something he didn't care enough about. She perked up upon hearing him enter. Aizawa, did you get what we needed from those two? She asked, walking up to him. Yes. He responded with a sigh. Mandalay didn't continue speaking, obviously waiting for him to continue with what he was saying. They asked for guns and live targets to fight against. He explained, observing her for her reaction. Clearly, that wasn't what she was expecting as she stared at him in pure awe. I will be following this up. He pinched the sides of his nose. For now, we'll just have to facilitate something different for the time being. Right. Mandalay spoke slowly, looking honestly uncomfortable with the realization of what they considered normal training. Aizawa would be lying if he said he didn't feel the same. Turning on his foot, Aizawa left for the exit. Grabbing out his phone, his finger lingered over Nizu's number. He turned his phone off.